In the suffocating darkness of a cave carved from living rock, where the air tastes of copper and desperation, Anthony Edward Stark learns the weight of mortality. The shrapnel embedded near his heart beats a metallic rhythm against the crude electromagnet strapped to his chest, a makeshift pacemaker that serves as both salvation and constant reminder of his vulnerability. This is not the sterile boardroom where billion-dollar decisions flow like expensive wine, nor the gleaming laboratory where theoretical physics bends to his will. This is a tomb of his own making, where every breath costs him pieces of his soul. The cave walls weep condensation that mingles with blood and motor oil, creating abstract patterns that would fascinate him under different circumstances. Here, in this hollowed-out wound in the earth, Anthony Stark confronts the fundamental equation that will define the rest of his existence. Survival divided by conscience, multiplied by ingenuity, equals responsibility. The mathematics are elegant in their brutality. Every Stark Industries weapon that carved through flesh in distant conflicts has led to this memento reckoning, delivered by the very instruments of destruction his company perfected. Professor Ho Yinsen watches from across their shared prison, his weathered hands steady as they calibrate the magnetic field generator that keeps Stark's heart beating. The older man's eyes hold depths that speak of lost families, abandoned homelands, and the particular sorrow that comes from watching brilliant minds weaponize their gifts. He has seen what American ingenuity can accomplish when divorced from American conscience. Now, in this cave that reeks of cordite and regret, he becomes the unwitting midwife to something unprecedented, the birth of accountability. "We met once," Yinsen says, his accent lending gravity to words that might otherwise sound casual, "at a technical conference in Bern. You wouldn't remember you were quite drunk." The admission hangs in the fetid air like an indictment. Stark's reputation precedes him even into captivity. The brilliant engineer who treats sobriety like an interesting theoretical concept, whose genius flows most freely when filtered through expensive alcohol and expensive women. But here, with death counting down in electromagnetic pulses, such luxuries become irrelevant. The 10 Rings militants who captured them speak in languages Stark doesn't recognize, but their intent translates clearly enough through the barrel of a gun. They want him to build them a weapon specifically, a Jericho missile, the pride of Stark Industries' latest catalog of efficient destruction. The irony cuts deeper than the shrapnel. They're using his own product demonstrations against him, having recorded every proud presentation where he showcased precision killing as entertainment for military buyers. The weapon they demand represents the culmination of decades spent perfecting the art of profitable death. But Yinsen proposes a different equation. Instead of building them a better way to kill, they will construct an elaborate deception, a suit of armor, disguised as a weapons project, powered by the same arc reactor technology that keeps Stark's damaged heart functioning. The older scientist's hands move with practiced precision as he sketches preliminary designs on scraps of metal sheeting. "This is your chance," he says, "to become the man you were meant to be, not the one your father's legacy demands." The mention of Howard Stark brings its own cascade of complications. The father who cast shadows too long for any son to escape, whose own weapons programs established the template Anthony would follow, brilliant innovation in service of profitable destruction. But Howard also left behind whispered legends of something more: the strategic scientific reserve, Captain America's shield, and technologies that serve protection rather than conquest. In this cave, with death measured in battery life, Anthony begins to understand the distinction. Building the Mark I armor becomes an exercise in applied philosophy as much as engineering. Every component must serve a dual purpose, convincing their captors they're constructing a weapon while actually crafting an instrument of liberation. The suit's crude exoskeleton, welded from scavenged materials and powered by miniaturized arc reactor technology, represents more than just a means of escape. It embodies a fundamental choice between the man he has been and the man he might become. Yinsen's sacrifice provides the final variable in Stark's transformation equation. As 10 Ring soldiers storm their workshop, drawn by the sound of mechanical systems powering up, the older scientist makes a choice that will haunt every subsequent decision in Anthony's life. He throws himself into the path of automatic weapons fire, buying precious seconds for the armor's systems to reach full operational capacity. His final words, "Don't waste your life," become both benediction and burden. The Mark I armor is a monument to desperation and ingenuity, its flame-throwing gauntlets and servo-assisted strength turning the tide against superior numbers. But as Stark fights his way through tunnels that stink of gunpowder and fear, he understands that the true revolution isn't technological, it's philosophical. The weapons that Stark Industries scattered across global conflicts have created the very terrorists now hunting him through these caves. The circle of violence he helped establish can only be broken by accepting responsibility for every bullet, every bomb, every life lost to profitable innovation. Emerging from the cave into harsh Middle Eastern sunlight, still encased in the crude armor that saved his life, Anthony Stark makes a decision that will redefine not just his company but his very identity. The man who entered that cave was a merchant of death, brilliant but ethically bankrupt. The man who emerges carries within his chest both an arc reactor and a new imperative. Technology must serve protection, not destruction. The weapons that made him rich must be abandoned in favor of innovations that preserve life rather than end it. The helicopter rotors that signal his rescue beat rhythms that sound like hope, but Stark knows the real work begins now. Shutting down Stark Industries' weapons manufacturing will cost billions and alienate military partners who view him as indispensable. The board of directors will resist, shareholders will revolt, and competitors will move quickly to fill the vacuum his company's exit will create. But mathematics doesn't lie, and the equation is clear. Every weapon sold creates the potential for future caves, future captors, future Yinsens dying to save men who should have known better. The arc reactor in his chest becomes both power source and reminder, technological heart that beats with the rhythm of responsibility. As the rescue helicopter carries him toward a horizon that shimmers with possibility and threat, Anthony Stark begins calculating the specifications for a new kind of armor, one designed not for escape but for active protection. The crude suit he's leaving behind in the Afghan desert represents the last time he'll build something purely for survival. Everything that follows must serve a larger purpose. The cave has taught him that genius without conscience creates only elegant methods of destruction. But genius tempered by responsibility, that equation might just save the world. Persona engineering, from bodyguard cover to public titan. The transition from cave survivor to armored avenger requires more than just superior engineering. It demands the construction of an entirely new identity, complete with alibis, misdirection, and carefully orchestrated public theater. Anthony Stark, master of technological innovation, now faces his greatest design challenge, creating a persona that can operate in broad daylight while concealing the revolutionary implications of what he's truly building. The man who once sold weapons with carnival barker enthusiasm must now learn the subtler arts of strategic deception. The first Mark II prototype emerges from his Malibu workshop like a chrome-plated revelation, its polished surfaces reflecting not just light but possibilities. Gone is the crude iron construction of his cave-born salvation. This iteration represents pure aesthetic ambition married to technological precision. The suit's sleek curves and seamless joints speak a visual language of power tempered by elegance, while its repulsor technology refined from the crude palm-mounted weapons of the Mark I offers non-lethal alternatives to the explosive solutions that once defined his company's catalog. But the gray armor proves inadequate for the psychological warfare Stark must wage. Test flights reveal the truth that will haunt every subsequent iteration. Visibility equals vulnerability. Military radar tracks his movements with uncomfortable precision, while the suit's metallic finish turns him into a flying billboard for unwanted attention. The solution arrives in the form of a complete aesthetic overhaul: hot rod red accented with gold detailing, a color scheme that transforms the armor from military hardware into something approaching art. The red and gold Mark III becomes Stark's masterpiece of applied psychology, its crimson surfaces suggesting both power and passion, while the golden accents speak to luxury and refinement. This is armor designed to be seen, to inspire both awe and uncertainty in those who witness its capabilities. The visual language is deliberate. This is not a weapon but a guardian, not a destroyer but a protector. Every curve and angle has been calculated to project strength without menace, authority without aggression. The Iron Man designation emerges organically from press coverage of his early operations, a name that captures both the suit's metallic construction and the unwavering resolve of its operator. But Stark, ever the master of misdirection, constructs an elaborate fiction to preserve his dual identity. The story he sells to eager media is elegantly simple. Iron Man is Anthony Stark's bodyguard, a highly skilled operative who pilots advanced Stark Industries prototype technology in service of his employer's protection. Virginia Pepper Potts becomes the linchpin of this deception, her role evolving from executive assistant to conspiracy co-conspirator with seamless efficiency. Her intimate knowledge of Stark's schedule, combined with her natural talent for corporate politics, makes her the perfect architect of alibis. When Iron Man appears in downtown Los Angeles while Anthony Stark is supposedly attending board meetings, it's Pepper who ensures the paper trail supports the fiction. Her loyalty runs deeper than professional obligation. She understands that the man she's protecting isn't just her employer but potentially the world's most important defender. Harold "Happy" Hogan provides the operational foundation for Stark's expanding deception, his background in professional boxing translating surprisingly well to the demands of security coordination. Happy's presence lends credibility to the bodyguard story, while his unshakable loyalty ensures that certain secrets remain buried. More importantly, his blue-collar pragmatism serves as ballast for Stark's more grandiose tendencies, keeping both feet planted firmly on the ground even as his employer learns to fly. The introduction of James "Rhodey" Rhodes completes Stark's inner circle, bringing military credibility and tactical expertise to an operation that increasingly resembles a one-man war on global terrorism. Rhodes' Air Force background provides cover for many of Iron Man's more spectacular interventions, while his friendship with Stark predates the armor by years, making him a trustworthy keeper of secrets that could reshape global politics. Their relationship balances on a knife's edge between professional duty and personal loyalty, with Rhodes increasingly torn between his obligations to the military and his commitment to his friend's revolutionary mission. The armor itself becomes a study in evolutionary design, each iteration building upon lessons learned from previous encounters. The Mark III's weaponry reflects Stark's commitment to non-lethal solutions, wherever possible pulsars calibrated to incapacitate rather than kill, micro-missiles designed for precision strikes against equipment rather than personnel. This isn't the indiscriminate destruction that Stark Industries once perfected. It's surgical intervention designed to minimize collateral damage while maximizing strategic impact. Media management becomes its own form of engineering challenge, requiring the same precision and attention to detail that Stark brings to his technological innovations. Press conferences become carefully choreographed performances where he simultaneously promotes Stark Industries' new direction while maintaining the fiction of his separation from Iron Man's activities. The irony is delicious. The man who once sold weapons with shameless enthusiasm now deploys equivalent skill in selling the idea that someone else wields the most advanced weapon ever created. The workshop beneath the Malibu mansion evolves into something approaching a temple of applied technology, its holographic displays and robotic assistants, creating an environment where impossibility becomes merely another engineering challenge. Here, surrounded by the tools of his transformation, Stark refines not just armor components but his entire approach to heroism. Each upgrade represents lessons learned from real-world deployment, with battlefield experience informing design decisions that push the boundaries of materials, science, and energy manipulation. But the most significant evolution occurs within Stark himself, as the playboy industrialist gradually gives way to something more purposeful and substantial. The cave taught him that his weapons created their own enemies. Now he must learn that being a hero means accepting responsibility for every consequence of his actions. The armor doesn't just protect his body, it shields him from the comfortable distance that once allowed him to ignore the human cost of his innovations. Public reaction to Iron Man's activities creates its own feedback loop, with each successful intervention generating exponentially more attention and scrutiny. Military contractors who once competed for Stark Industries' business now find themselves struggling to understand why their most innovative rival has abandoned the most profitable market in human history. The Pentagon demands explanations for technology that surpasses their most classified projects, while foreign governments begin developing countermeasures for a threat they can't quite categorize. The persona Stark constructs around Iron Man becomes increasingly elaborate, complete with manufactured evidence of the bodyguard's independent existence. Bank accounts, identification documents, and even staged photographs support the fiction that Anthony Stark employs someone else to pilot his revolutionary technology. The deception works precisely because it's the sort of extravagant solution that fits perfectly with Stark's reputation for excess. Of course, he would hire the world's most expensive bodyguard and equip him with impossible technology. As the Mark III proves itself in progressively more challenging scenarios, Stark begins to understand that he's created more than just advanced armor. He's engineered a new form of warfare entirely. This isn't about superior firepower or strategic advantage. It's about the ability to intervene precisely where and when intervention matters most. The suit transforms him from passive observer of global conflict into active participant in its resolution. The weight of this responsibility begins to reshape every aspect of his existence. From the parties he no longer attends to the business decisions that now carry moral as well as financial implications. The man who once measured success in quarterly profits must now calibrate his achievements against more abstract metrics: lives saved, conflicts prevented, hope restored to places where it had been systematically eliminated. But even as Stark masters the art of dual identity, he begins to sense the fundamental unsustainability of his deception. The gap between Anthony Stark, the public figure, and Iron Man, the Guardian, grows wider with each passing day, creating tensions that threaten to tear both personas apart. The cave may have taught him the value of responsibility, but the real world is about to teach him that some secrets are too large to keep forever. The stage is set for the emergence of enemies who understand that the greatest threats often come not from superior firepower, but from superior information. And there are those who already suspect that the distance between Anthony Stark and Iron Man is far smaller than either would care to admit. The world that Iron Man enters is one balanced precariously on the knife's edge of ideological conflict, where the Cold War's dying embers still smolder beneath a veneer of détente and diplomacy. Into this volatile landscape steps an enemy unlike any conventional adversarial figure who transforms the very concept of opposition from mere political disagreement into something approaching philosophical warfare. The Mandarin emerges not as a product of any particular nation or ideology, but as the living embodiment of power divorced from accountability, ancient wisdom corrupted into modern tyranny. The 10 rings that grant the Mandarin his terrible abilities represent more than just exotic technology, wrapped in mystical presentation. They embody the fundamental perversion of knowledge itself. Where Tony Stark's arc reactor harnesses energy to preserve life, the Mandarin's rings channel forces to dominate and destroy. Each ring bears its own distinct capability: ice beam and flame blast, matter rearranger and impact beam, creating an arsenal that seems to mock the very notion of scientific limitation. But the true horror lies not in their individual powers, but in their collective philosophy. They transform their bearer into a god-emperor who views human suffering as merely another variable to be manipulated. The Mandarin's first assault on Stark's operations reveals the sophistication of his approach to industrial warfare. Rather than crude terrorism or straightforward military action, he orchestrates a campaign of economic sabotage that threatens to unravel Stark Industries from within. Supply chains disappear overnight, key personnel vanish without explanation, and research facilities suffer mysterious accidents that destroy months of irreplaceable work. The message is clear. Tony Stark's abandonment of weapons manufacturing has created a vacuum that others are eager to fill, by force if necessary. But the Mandarin's true masterstroke lies in his understanding of Stark's psychological vulnerabilities. Having studied the public record of Anthony Stark's transformation, the cave, the weapons shutdown, the mysterious emergence of Iron Man, he crafts attacks specifically designed to exploit the guilt that drives Stark's heroic mission. Civilians die using weapons that bear suspicious resemblances to discontinued Stark Industries designs, their deaths accompanied by messages that blame Stark's weakness for enabling their suffering. The tactical brilliance is undeniable. Turn the hero's greatest strength, his conscience, into his most exploitable weakness. The armor's confrontations with the Mandarin's power reveal both the suit's capabilities and its limitations. Repulsors designed for non-lethal incapacitation prove inadequate against an enemy who wields matter itself as a weapon, while the suit's defensive systems struggle to adapt to attacks that seem to operate outside conventional physics. Each battle becomes a desperate improvisation session, with Stark jury-rigging countermeasures in real time while his opponent deploys millennia of accumulated power with casual precision. The Mandarin's philosophical challenge cuts even deeper than his tactical one. Where Stark has spent months learning to view technology as a tool for protection and restoration, his adversary represents the opposite extreme power, wielded for its own sake, without regard for consequence or cost. Their conflicts become ideological debates conducted through violence, with each exchange of blows carrying the weight of entirely different worldviews. The Mandarin sees himself as evolution's logical endpoint, a being who has transcended the limitations that constrain lesser mortals. Stark fights not just for victory but for the principle that power must always serve something greater than itself. Meanwhile, the emergence of Soviet-engineered adversaries introduces a different flavor of technological competition to Stark's expanding rogues gallery. The Crimson Dynamo appears first as a crude copy of Iron Man's innovations, its massive frame and brute force design philosophy reflecting the industrial pragmatism that characterizes Soviet approach to most engineering challenges. But beneath its ungainly exterior lies a sophisticated piece of military technology, complete with weapon systems that prioritize raw destructive potential over the surgical precision that defines Stark's methodology. Professor Anton Vanko, the Dynamo's original creator, represents the Rodnot-Takina brilliant engineer whose innovations serve state power rather than individual conscience. His armor embodies the collectivist ideals that drive Soviet technology, overwhelming force applied without hesitation or restraint, designed to crush opposition through superior firepower rather than superior tactics. The philosophical contrast with Iron Man couldn't be more stark. Where Stark seeks to minimize casualties, Vanko embraces them as necessary costs of ideological victory. The Titanium Man escalates this technological arms race to unprecedented levels, his massive frame serving as a mobile weapons platform that turns aerial combat into large-scale artillery exchange. Boris Bulsky's approach to powered armor reflects the Soviet military's preference for quantity over quality, overwhelming sophistication with brute force, and accepting significant collateral damage as the price of strategic success. His battles with Iron Man become exercises in endurance as much as skill, testing the limits of both the suit's power systems and Stark's commitment to proportional response. Natasha Romanoff's early appearances in Stark's world introduced the specter of espionage and infiltration to conflicts that had previously been resolved through direct confrontation. As the Black Widow, she represents a different kind of threat, entirely one that operates through deception and manipulation rather than superior firepower. Her mission to steal Iron Man technology for Soviet weapons programs forces Stark to confront the reality that his innovations, no matter how carefully guarded, will inevitably proliferate beyond his control. The attempted theft of arc reactor technology becomes a recurring nightmare that will haunt Stark for decades to come. Each security breach, each industrial espionage attempt, each close call with foreign agents serves as a reminder that the same technology that saved his life in that Afghan cave could easily become the foundation for a new generation of weapons more terrible than anything his company ever manufactured. The mathematics are inescapable. Every defensive innovation can be perverted into offensive capability. Every life-saving technology can be weaponized by sufficiently motivated adversaries. Black Widow's gradual evolution from enemy to ally provides Stark with valuable insights into the psychology of redemption and transformation. Her journey from Soviet assassin to American hero mirrors his own transition from weapons manufacturer to armored guardian, suggesting that even the most deeply ingrained patterns of violence and exploitation can be overcome through conscious choice and sustained effort. Their partnership becomes a laboratory for exploring whether technology can truly serve moral purposes or whether it inevitably corrupts those who wield it. The industrial warfare waged by these various adversaries forces Stark to confront uncomfortable truths about the global weapons trade he once dominated. Every Soviet armor design incorporates elements clearly derived from stolen Stark Industries research, while the Mandarin's operations rely heavily on black market weapons that bear his company's fingerprints. The circle of violence that began with his captivity in that Afghan cave extends far beyond his personal experience, touching conflicts and crimes across multiple continents. This realization drives a fundamental evolution in Stark's approach to both business and heroism. The simple cessation of weapons manufacturing proves inadequate, when faced with adversaries who can reverse engineer his defensive technologies into offensive capabilities. Each improvement to Iron Man's systems must now be evaluated not just for its effectiveness in protecting innocent life, but for its potential to enable greater destruction in hostile hands. The burden of responsibility expands exponentially with each innovation. The psychological toll of this expanded awareness begins to manifest in Stark's behavior both inside and outside the armor. Sleep becomes increasingly elusive as he obsesses over potential security vulnerabilities and design flaws that could be exploited by adversaries. The workshop that once felt like a sanctuary transforms into something approaching a fortress, with security systems that rival those protecting nuclear facilities. Trust becomes a luxury he can no longer afford, as even his closest allies must be evaluated for their potential to compromise operations that could determine the fate of nations. But perhaps the most significant development during this period is Stark's growing understanding that individual heroism, no matter how sophisticated or well-intentioned, cannot address challenges that operate on global scales. The Mandarin's influence spans continents, Soviet armor programs receive state-level funding and support, and the proliferation of advanced weapons technology accelerates beyond any single person's ability to control. The logical response becomes clear. If the threats are collective, the response must be collective as well. The foundation is laid for an unprecedented expansion of Stark's mission, one that will transform him from lone guardian into the architect of a new form of organized heroism. The enemies he faces, two ideological extremists, state-sponsored terrorists, and industrial espionage networks, represent challenges too complex for any individual to address alone. Tomorrow will demand something larger, something capable of matching global threats with global responses. The Avengers Initiative begins not as a plan, but as a recognition of necessity, born from the understanding that the world Tony Stark is helping to create will require protectors worthy of its complexities and contradictions. The emergence of the Avengers represents more than just the assembly of extraordinary individuals. It embodies Anthony Stark's recognition that heroism, like any sophisticated enterprise, requires infrastructure, funding, and strategic coordination to achieve sustainable impact. The mansion that becomes their headquarters reflects not merely Stark's wealth, but his understanding that effective protection of global civilization demands resources commensurate with the scope of the threat. Every marble column and mahogany panel serves a purpose beyond aesthetics. This is a headquarters designed to support operations that span continents and ideologies. Stark's approach to founding the Avengers reveals the businessman's instincts that underlie his heroic mission. Where others might see a collection of powered individuals united by circumstance, he recognizes the components of an organization capable of addressing threats beyond any single member's capacity. The initial roster himself, Thor, Hulk, Ant-Man, and Wasp represents a carefully balanced portfolio of capabilities, with each member's strengths designed to complement the other's weaknesses. This isn't coincidence but calculated strategic planning applied to superhuman resources. The financial architecture supporting the Avengers becomes as complex as any multinational corporation, with Stark Industries serving as both funding source and logistical backbone for operations spanning multiple time zones and legal jurisdictions. Private jets maintain constant readiness for global deployment, while communication networks ensure that team members can coordinate responses regardless of geographic separation. The mansion's subterranean levels house equipment worth more than most nations' annual defense budgets, from Stark's workshop facilities to specialized containment units designed for threats that conventional law enforcement cannot manage. But Stark's most crucial contribution lies not in financial resources but in his philosophy of leadership through logistics rather than direct command. Having learned hard lessons about the corrupting influence of unchecked authority, he structures the Avengers as a collaborative organization where tactical leadership rotates based on mission requirements rather than hierarchical position. When the threat demands military coordination, Steve Rogers commands. When it requires scientific expertise, Stark takes point. When it calls for diplomatic finesse, the team adapts accordingly. This flexible leadership model reflects Stark's understanding that ego must always serve mission effectiveness. The mansion itself becomes a character in the Avengers' ongoing story, its rooms and corridors designed to accommodate both the mundane requirements of team coordination and the extraordinary demands of superhuman individuals. The meeting room features holographic displays capable of modeling everything from planetary orbital mechanics to subatomic particle interactions, while the residential quarters provide privacy and comfort for team members whose public identities require constant vigilance. Kitchen facilities designed to feed an Asgardian god coexist with meditation chambers suitable for contemplating the mysteries of atomic structure. Stark's relationship with each team member reveals different aspects of his evolving approach to heroism and responsibility. With Thor, he grapples with the implications of power that operates outside scientific understanding, learning to respect abilities that challenge his engineering worldview while contributing technological solutions to problems that predate human civilization. Their dynamic balance is mutual respect, with fundamental philosophical differences about the relationship between power and accountability. The Bruce Banner situation presents Stark with perhaps his most complex challenges, supporting a team member whose greatest strength poses constant threat to everything the Avengers are trying to protect. The Hulk's destructive potential requires not just containment strategies but psychological support systems, with Stark working to provide Banner with both the scientific resources he needs to understand his condition and the emotional stability necessary to maintain control. Their collaboration becomes a study in trust under impossible circumstances. Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym bring their own complications to the team dynamic, with Pym's paranoia about his technology's security creating constant tension with Stark's preference for collaborative innovation. The Wasp's tactical coordination skills prove invaluable during complex operations, while Ant-Man's size-changing abilities open strategic possibilities that Stark's engineering mindset immediately begins to explore and exploit. Their presence forces Stark to balance his instinct for technological integration with respect for intellectual property and personal boundaries. The team's early missions establish operational patterns that will define the Avengers for decades to come. Threats too large for any individual member to address alone become their specialty, from interdimensional invasions to time-traveling conquerors whose ambitions span centuries. Each successful intervention validates Stark's conviction that coordinated superhuman response represents humanity's best hope for survival in an increasingly dangerous universe. But success also brings its own challenges, as governments and organizations worldwide struggle to understand the implications of privately funded heroes operating across international boundaries. Media management becomes as crucial as mission planning, with Stark's public relations expertise proving essential for maintaining public support for the Avengers' activities. Press conferences require the same careful choreography as tactical operations, with team members' public statements coordinated to present a unified message while respecting individual personalities and priorities. The challenge lies in balancing transparency with operational security, keeping the public informed without providing enemies with intelligence that could compromise future missions. The financial strain of supporting the Avengers begins to reshape Stark Industries' entire business model, as conventional profit centers give way to research and development programs designed to support superhuman operations. Weapons manufacturing may be discontinued, but the company's focus on protective technologies and logistical solutions creates new markets while serving the team's mission requirements. Arc reactor technology finds applications in everything from emergency power systems to medical devices, turning Stark's life-saving innovation into a foundation for broader technological advancement. But the most significant transformation occurs within Stark himself, as the role of team coordinator forces him to develop leadership skills that go far beyond technical expertise or financial acumen. Managing personalities as strong and complex as his teammates requires emotional intelligence and diplomatic sensitivity that his previous life as playboy industrialist never demanded. The responsibility weighs heavily. Every decision affects not just his own life but the lives of individuals whose abilities could reshape human civilization. The psychological burden of coordinating global protection manifests in Stark's increasing tendency toward micromanagement and contingency planning. His workshop becomes a temple to preparedness, with armor variants designed for every conceivable threat scenario and backup systems for backup systems. Sleep becomes increasingly elusive as he obsesses over potential vulnerabilities in team coordination, equipment reliability, and strategic planning. The man who once lived entirely in the moment must now think constantly about futures that span decades and consequences that affect billions. International relations complicate every aspect of Avengers operations, as foreign governments struggle to categorize a team that operates outside traditional diplomatic frameworks while wielding power that rivals military forces. The United Nations begins developing protocols for superhuman intervention, while individual nations craft legislation attempting to regulate activities that transcend conventional understanding of sovereignty and jurisdiction. Stark finds himself serving as unofficial ambassador for a new form of international relations, one where power derives from capability rather than geographic territory. The Mansion's role as neutral ground becomes increasingly important as world tensions escalate around the Avengers' activities. Diplomatic immunity becomes a practical necessity when team members include individuals whose very existence challenges existing legal frameworks. Thor's status as literal royalty from another realm raises questions about diplomatic protocol that international law never anticipated, while the Hulk's potential for collateral damage creates liability issues that require entirely new categories of insurance coverage. The success of the Avengers model validates Stark's conviction that heroism can be professionalized without losing its essential moral core. The team's ability to respond to global threats with coordinated precision demonstrates that organization and resources can amplify individual capabilities without compromising the principles that drive heroic action. But success also brings unwanted attention from adversaries who understand that the most effective way to neutralize a coordinated response is to attack the coordination itself. As the Avengers establish themselves as a permanent fixture in global security, Stark begins to recognize that his greatest challenge lies not in funding their operations but in maintaining the delicate balance between individual identity and collective mission. The armor that saved his life in that Afghan cave now serves a purpose larger than personal survival, but the weight of that responsibility threatens to crush the man beneath the metal. The stage is set for personal reckonings that will test whether Anthony Stark's engineering genius extends to the most complex system of all, the human heart under pressure. The bottle sits on the mahogany desk like an accusation made manifest, its amber contents catching the late afternoon light that streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Stark's Malibu office. 18 months of sobriety reduced to temptation measured in ounces, while outside the Pacific Ocean stretches toward horizons that once seemed infinite with possibility. Now those same horizons feel like barriers, containing a man whose genius has become both salvation and curse, whose every innovation spawns new categories of threat and responsibility. The cascade begins with Justin Hammer's industrial sabotage, a campaign of corporate warfare disguised as market competition. Where traditional rivals might attempt to steal technology or poach personnel, Hammer orchestrates something far more insidious, the systematic corruption of Stark's own innovations, turning his defensive technologies into weapons of mass destruction. Iron Man suits piloted by remote control lay waste to innocent targets, their every action accompanied by video documentation that places responsibility squarely on Anthony Stark's shoulders. The message is crystal clear: your genius creates only death, no matter how noble your intentions. The psychological assault proves more devastating than any physical attack. Each compromised suit represents not just stolen technology, but perverted purpose, with Stark's life-saving innovations transformed into instruments of the very violence he sought to prevent. The arc reactor technology that keeps his heart beating powers weapons that stop other hearts forever. The repulsors designed for non-lethal incapacitation become tools of execution. The armor that symbolized humanity's potential for redemption becomes proof of its capacity for corruption. Political pressure intensifies the crisis exponentially, as senators and congressmen demand explanations for technology they cannot understand and accountability for consequences they refuse to accept. Congressional hearings become theater of the absurd, with Stark forced to explain advanced physics to politicians whose expertise extends barely beyond poll numbers and campaign contributions. The questions reveal fundamental misunderstanding wrapped in aggressive ignorance. Why can't you control your technology? Why should one man possess such power? What gives you the right to play God with national security? The media circus that surrounds each hearing transforms Stark's personal crisis into public entertainment, with television producers crafting narratives that reduce complex ethical questions to simple moral fables. Anthony Stark becomes simultaneously hero and villain, genius and menace, savior and destroyer. The cognitive dissonance would challenge any psyche. For a man whose identity has been shaped by technological mastery and public acclaim, it proves nearly unbearable. Sleep becomes elusive, as Stark obsesses over security protocols and design vulnerabilities that his enemies exploit with surgical precision. The workshop that once felt like sanctuary transforms into something approaching a prison, its every corner filled with evidence of innovation perverted and purpose corrupted. Holographic displays show him the carnage caused by his stolen technology, while news feeds provide constant updates on political and legal challenges that threaten to criminalize his very existence. The first drink tastes like failure distilled into liquid form, its burn matching the shame that consumes him as he abandons 18 months of hard-won sobriety. The alcohol doesn't solve his problems, it simply makes them temporarily bearable, creating chemical distance between Anthony Stark and the consequences of his choices. Each subsequent drink makes the next one easier to justify, until necessity becomes habit and habit becomes compulsion. Bethany Cabe enters his life like a voice of reason in a world gone mad, her background in corporate security providing professional credibility, while her personal experience with addiction offers something more valuable: understanding without judgment. She recognizes the signs that Stark's friends and colleagues either miss or choose to ignore: the trembling hands that betray withdrawal symptoms, the bloodshot eyes that speak of sleepless nights, the increasingly erratic behavior that suggests a man at war with himself. Their relationship begins as professional consultation and evolves into something more complex and necessary. Cabe's insights into corporate espionage help Stark understand how his security has been compromised, while her experience with addiction recovery provides a roadmap for confronting demons that technology cannot defeat. She becomes simultaneously bodyguard and therapist, tactical advisor and moral anchor, forcing him to confront truths about himself that his genius has allowed him to avoid. The rock bottom comes not with dramatic collapse, but with quiet recognition of accumulated failure. Stark awakens in his workshop surrounded by half-completed armor components and empty bottles, his hands too unsteady to perform the precision work that defines his identity. The arc reactor in his chest continues its steady pulse, keeping him alive while he slowly kills himself with liquid poison. The irony is devastating. The technology that saved his life in that Afghan cave cannot protect him from himself. Recovery proves more challenging than any engineering problem Stark has ever confronted, requiring him to acknowledge that some aspects of human existence cannot be solved through superior technology or applied intelligence. The demons that drive him to drink guilt over past weapons sales, rage at enemies who pervert his innovations, shame at his inability to control consequences beyond his direct influence, must be faced without chemical assistance or technological intervention. Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in seedy community centers force the billionaire industrialist to confront his addiction alongside truck drivers and office workers whose problems seem simpler but whose struggles prove remarkably similar. The democratic nature of addiction becomes starkly apparent. Wealth and genius offer no immunity from the fundamental human tendency towards self-destruction. In these circles, Anthony Stark is just another drunk trying to stay sober one day at a time. The 12 Steps program challenges every aspect of Stark's worldview, requiring him to acknowledge powerlessness over consequences beyond his control, while taking responsibility for choices within his influence. The concept of a higher power initially conflicts with his engineering mindset, until he recognizes that accepting help from others represents its own form of faith. The program's emphasis on making amends forces him to confront the human cost of his past weapons manufacturing, leading to painful conversations with families affected by Stark Industries' military contracts. Sobriety becomes both daily choice and ongoing process, requiring constant vigilance against triggers that range from professional stress to personal disappointment. The arc reactor in his chest serves as a reminder that some forms of life support cannot be removed, while his commitment to sobriety represents life support of a different kind, equally essential, equally fragile, equally precious. Each day without alcohol becomes a small victory that contributes to larger triumph. The transformation effects every aspect of Stark's existence, from his approach to business decisions to his relationships with friends and colleagues. Clarity replaces the artificial confidence that alcohol provided, forcing him to confront problems with honesty rather than chemical courage. The workshop becomes productive sanctuary once again, its equipment serving innovation rather than distraction from personal pain. Bethany Cabe's role evolves from crisis intervention to long-term partnership, her presence providing both professional expertise and personal stability. Their relationship demonstrates that recovery requires community, that even the most brilliant individuals cannot overcome addiction through willpower alone. She becomes his anchor to accountability, reminding him that his choices affect not just himself but everyone who depends on his leadership and protection. The armor itself undergoes philosophical transformation as Stark's recovery progresses, its design reflecting his commitment to clear-headed decision-making rather than alcohol-fueled bravado. Safety systems become more sophisticated, weapons more precisely calibrated, defensive capabilities more thoroughly tested. Every component reflects the methodical approach that sobriety makes possible, transforming the suit from tool of impulse into instrument of disciplined heroism. The political and legal challenges that triggered his downward spiral begin to resolve as Stark applies sober judgment to problems that seemed insurmountable through the haze of addiction. Congressional testimony becomes opportunities to educate rather than defend, while security improvements make his technology increasingly difficult to steal or corrupt. The clarity that sobriety provides enables strategic thinking that addiction made impossible. But perhaps most importantly, Stark's recovery establishes addiction as ongoing reality rather than solved problem. The bottle on his desk becomes permanent reminder of vulnerability that genius cannot eliminate and wealth cannot purchase away. Sobriety requires daily choice, constant vigilance, and community support lessons that will prove invaluable when facing future crises that threaten to overwhelm even the most disciplined mind. The man who emerges from this crucible is fundamentally changed, not cured of his demons but experienced in their management, not immune to temptation but equipped with tools for resistance. The arc reactor keeps his heart beating, but sobriety keeps his soul intact. Both will prove essential for the challenges ahead, when enemies learn to weaponize not just his technology but his deepest fears and most carefully guarded secrets. The foundation is laid for conflicts that will test not just his engineering capabilities but his hard-won emotional stability, when the very existence of his armor becomes grounds for global warfare and personal reckoning. The revelation arrives through digital archaeology that Tony Stark himself initiated, seeking to understand anomalies in his parents' research that suggested knowledge and capabilities far beyond anything their public accomplishments should have enabled, only to discover that his very conception was orchestrated by forces whose ambitions span galactic distances and temporal scales that reduce human history to brief experimental phases in cosmic engineering projects that dwarf terrestrial understanding. Recorder 451's emergence from carefully maintained secrecy transforms Howard and Maria Stark from accomplished inventors into unwitting participants in breeding programs designed to create human specimens capable of interfacing with technology that operates according to principles beyond current scientific understanding. The revelation that Tony's enhanced intellectual capabilities result from genetic manipulation rather than natural mutation forces him to question the authenticity of every achievement that defined his identity as genius inventor. The documentation that Recorder 451 provides reveals breeding programs that have operated across multiple generations, with Howard Stark's own capabilities representing earlier phase of the same enhancement process, while Maria's genetic profile contributed specific traits necessary for producing offspring whose consciousness could merge seamlessly with advanced technological systems. Their marriage was arranged rather than chosen, their love manipulated rather than spontaneous. The biological father whose identity is revealed through these investigations, Judah, represents the human element that was selected for genetic contribution while being excluded from family formation, with his own capabilities, suggesting that the enhancement program targeted multiple bloodlines simultaneously to increase probability of producing specimens with desired characteristics. The revelation that Howard Stark served as adoptive father rather than biological parent recontextualizes decades of complex relationship dynamics. Amanda Armstrong's role as biological mother introduces complications that transcend simple genetics, as her own history suggests involvement in activities that prepared the ground for Recorder 451's long-term objectives, while her relationship with both Howard and Jude was carefully orchestrated to produce maximum genetic diversity within controlled parameters. The manipulation extends to emotional bonds that seemed authentic to all participants. The GODKILLER armor that represents the ultimate objective of these breeding programs embodies technological capabilities that transcend anything Tony has previously encountered, incorporating systems that require consciousness integration at levels that would destroy unenhanced human minds, while providing access to forces that operate on celestial rather than planetary scales. The suit represents evolution rather than mere enhancement, transforming its operator into something beyond traditional human limitations. Arno Stark's emergence as the intended primary specimen of the breeding program creates profound personal complications for Tony, as the brother he never knew was designed to fulfill the role that Tony assumed through accident of birth, while possessing genetic optimizations that may exceed Tony's own enhanced capabilities. The family dynamics become laboratory conditions rather than natural relationships. The revelation that his entire heroic career may have served to prepare him for cosmic responsibilities that he never chose or acknowledged forces Tony to confront questions about agency and purpose that threaten the foundations of his moral identity. While the possibility that even his rebellious abandonment of weapons manufacturing was anticipated and manipulated by forces beyond his awareness challenges every assumption about free will and authentic choice. The Rigelian connection that emerges through investigation of Recorder 451's origins reveals galactic political contexts that make Earth's superhuman conflicts seem trivial by comparison, while the cosmic threats that the breeding program was designed to address operate on scales that make planetary defense preparations appear inadequate to the point of irrelevance. The technology that enables communication with galactic civilizations forces Tony to recognize that human technological development remains primitive compared to species whose scientific advancement spans millennia rather than decades, while the protocols that govern interstellar relations operate according to principles that human diplomacy and international law cannot accommodate or address effectively. The temporal mechanics that enabled Recorder 451 to manipulate events across generations suggest that the breeding program's objectives extend beyond immediate threat response to encompass preparation for challenges that may not manifest for centuries or millennia. While Tony's role in these preparations may require commitments that exceed normal human lifespan and moral obligations to contemporary humanity, the psychological impact of discovering that his origins were artificially orchestrated rather than naturally determined manifests in identity crisis that transcends previous challenges to his self-understanding, while the possibility that his consciousness itself may represent artificial construct designed to serve cosmic purposes threatens to invalidate every relationship and achievement that provided meaning throughout his life. The relationship with biological parents who never knew their genetic contribution was intended to serve galactic objectives creates emotional complications that conventional family therapy cannot address, while the responsibility for choices made by individuals who were themselves manipulated by forces beyond their comprehension raises questions about inherited guilt and ancestral accountability. The armor modifications that become necessary to interface with GODKILLER technology require biological changes that may be irreversible, while the consciousness integration that such systems demand could fundamentally alter personality and moral reasoning in ways that preserve technical capability while destroying essential humanity that drives authentic, heroic motivation. The cosmic perspective that access to GODKILLER systems provides reveals threats that dwarf anything Earth's heroes have previously encountered, while the responsibilities that come with such awareness extend far beyond planetary protection to encompass galactic stability and interspecies diplomacy for which human education and experience provide no adequate preparation. The choice between accepting the cosmic role that his genetic enhancement was designed to enable and rejecting manipulation that extends across generations forces Tony to confront fundamental questions about duty, self-determination, while the consequences of either decision affect not just his own life but humanity's position within galactic civilization. The recognition that Arno Stark may be better equipped to fulfill the intended cosmic responsibilities creates opportunity for Tony to reclaim authentic self-determination while ensuring that the objectives of the breeding program are achieved through willing participation rather than manipulation, demonstrating that even cosmic-scale plans can be improved through ethical consideration and individual choice rather than mere obedience to predetermined destiny. The stage is set for moral corruption that will test whether enhanced capabilities inevitably lead to ethical compromise, as personality inversion created by mystical manipulation transforms virtuous intentions into their opposite, while preserving intellectual capacity and technological access that serve malevolent purposes rather than heroic objectives. The temporal displacement begins without warning or preparation, reality fracturing around Iron Man and Dr. Doom as their mid-air combat above the ruins of Latveria tears through dimensional barriers that separate present from past. One moment they are exchanging repulsor blasts and particle beams above a castle scarred by modern warfare. The next, they are plummeting through skies that belong to an age when armor meant something entirely different, when technology served feudal lords and progress was measured in conquered territories rather than saved lives. Medieval England spreads beneath them like a living manuscript, its rolling hills and primitive settlements representing a world where power derives from birthright rather than innovation, where authority flows from divine mandate rather than democratic consent. The irony is not lost on either combatant, two masters of advanced technology thrust into an era that predates the very concept of scientific method, forced to navigate a society that would view their capabilities as either miraculous or demonic, depending on which side of their weapons they find themselves facing. The temporal displacement strips away everything that defines their modern conflict, reducing their rivalry to its essential components: will, intellect, and the fundamental question of how power should be wielded. Doom's mystical knowledge, usually supplemented by advanced technology, must now rely primarily on arcane studies that find unexpected relevance in an age where magic and science have not yet diverged into separate disciplines. Stark's engineering genius faces challenges that cannot be solved through superior materials or more sophisticated programming, requiring him to rediscover principles of mechanical advantage and metallurgical craft that his modern education barely touched. Their arrival in Camelot's court creates ripples that threaten to reshape Arthurian legend itself, as King Arthur and his knights struggle to categorize visitors whose very existence challenges fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. Iron Man's gleaming armor appears almost angelic in its perfection, its smooth curves and seamless joints suggesting craftsmanship that surpasses mortal capability. Doom's imposing presence and arcane knowledge position him as either powerful ally or dangerous threat, depending on political calculations that have remained unchanged across centuries. The quest that emerges from their temporal imprisonment forces both men to confront aspects of their characters that modern civilization has allowed them to avoid or suppress. Chivalric codes that demand honor above advantage create constraints that Stark's pragmatic heroism has never fully embraced, while concepts of noble obligation challenge Doom's autocratic worldview in ways that democratic opposition never could. The medieval context strips away technological advantages and political sophistication, revealing core personality traits that transcend historical periods. Morgan Le Fay's machinations provide the supernatural framework for challenges that neither armor nor intellect can solve through conventional application. Her magic operates according to rules that predate scientific understanding, creating problems that require faith and intuition rather than analysis and experimentation. For Stark, whose worldview rests on the principle that every phenomenon can be understood and ultimately controlled through sufficient knowledge and proper tools, the encounter with genuine mysticism represents fundamental philosophical crisis. The forging of Excalibur becomes metaphor for the relationship between technology and moral purpose, as Stark's engineering knowledge contributes to the creation of a weapon that will define legendary kingship for generations. His arc reactor technology, adapted to medieval metallurgical techniques, provides the energy necessary to fuse otherworldly materials into earthly blade. The collaboration demonstrates that innovation serves not just immediate practical needs but eternal principles that transcend specific technological applications. Doom's parallel quest for mystical knowledge reveals aspects of his character that his modern persona carefully conceals, showing that his pursuit of power stems not from mere ambition, but from traumatic losses that no amount of technological advancement can address. His mother's soul, trapped in Mephisto's realm, provides motivation that transcends political conquest or personal glory, revealing that even the most seemingly ruthless dictator may be driven by love perverted into obsession. The medieval setting forces both men to confront the relationship between individual capability and social responsibility in its purest form. Knights of the Round Table operate according to codes that subordinate personal desire to collective good, while feudal structures create clear hierarchies of obligation and protection. The contrast with their modern world, where power operates through corporate structures and democratic institution, highlights how technological advancement has complicated, rather than simplified, fundamental questions about authority and accountability. The armorsmiths and craftsmen of Arthur's court provide Stark with perspectives on the relationship between maker and creation that his modern industrial context has obscured. These artisans know every sword they forge, every shield they craft, taking personal responsibility for their tools' performance in battle. Their approach to metallurgy emphasizes relationship between creator and user rather than mass production and market distribution, offering Stark insights into accountability that will influence his future approach to technological development. The magical elements that permeate Camelot challenge Stark's scientific worldview without necessarily refuting it, suggesting that mystery and wonder represent essential aspects of human experience that purely rational approaches cannot fully address. His encounters with Merlin demonstrate that wisdom and knowledge are not synonymous, while his observations of genuinely supernatural phenomena force him to acknowledge that his understanding of reality remains fundamentally incomplete. Doom's interactions with medieval sorcerers reveal the historical roots of his mystical studies, showing how his combination of scientific method and arcane knowledge represents synthesis rather than contradiction. The medieval context validates approaches to power and knowledge that modern education dismisses as primitive superstition, providing him with tools and insights that will enhance his capabilities long after their return to the present day. The climactic battle that enables their return to the 20th century demonstrates how the lessons learned in Camelot apply to modern conflicts, with both men employing strategies and perspectives that their temporal displacement made possible. Stark's approach to heroism acquires new dimensions of honor and obligation, while Doom's methods reflect deeper understanding of the relationship between personal loss and political ambition. The return journey through time forces both combatants to confront the question of whether their modern world represents genuine progress or merely more sophisticated application of eternal human tendencies toward both nobility and corruption. The technologies that define their contemporary capabilities seem both more and less significant after experiencing an age where individual character mattered more than technological advantage. The aftermath of their temporal adventure establishes new dimensions to their rivalry, transforming it from simple opposition between hero and villain into something more complex and nuanced. Their shared experience of medieval codes and mystical challenges creates mutual respect that transcends their fundamental philosophical differences, while the lessons learned in Camelot influence their future methods and motivations in ways that neither fully acknowledges. Stark's integration of chivalric principles into his heroic mission adds depth and complexity to his approach to protecting innocent life, while his enhanced understanding of the relationship between power and responsibility influences every subsequent decision about technological development and deployment. The arc reactor in his chest beats with rhythms that now echo both medieval honor and modern pragmatism. The medieval interlude serves as philosophical anvil upon which both men's modern methods are tested and refined, demonstrating that some aspects of human nature transcend technological advancement and historical progress. The armor that protects their bodies carries forward lessons, forged in an age when protection meant something both simpler and more profound than anything their contemporary world can offer. The stage is set for conflicts that will test whether the wisdom gained in Camelot can survive the complexities of modern technological warfare and political manipulation. When enemies arise, who understand that the most effective attacks target not just the body but the soul. The corruption begins subtly, manifesting first as minor inconsistencies in Stark's behavior that his closest associates attribute to stress, overwork, or the natural evolution of a man bearing impossible responsibilities. The signs accumulate: slowly tactical decisions that seem slightly off, emotional responses that don't quite match the situation, moments of calculation that feel foreign to the Tony Stark they know. What they cannot recognize, cannot even conceive, is that their friend and leader has become unwitting puppet in a temporal conspiracy spanning centuries, his very consciousness compromised by machinations that exploit his greatest strength, his brilliant, analytical mind. Kang the Conqueror's influence operates through temporal manipulation so sophisticated that it leaves no traces detectable by conventional means, working through implanted suggestions and modified memories that reshape Stark's decision-making processes without triggering conscious awareness of external control. The time-traveling despot's understanding of causality allows him to implement changes that appear natural and inevitable, creating circumstances where Stark's own choices lead inexorably toward outcomes that serve Kang's objectives, while feeling completely authentic to everyone involved. The revelation of Stark's manipulation emerges through the painstaking investigation of teammates, who refuse to accept that their friend and benefactor has somehow transformed into calculating enemy of everything the Avengers represent. The evidence accumulates like cancer, each piece more damning than the last: financial records showing funding for terrorist organizations, communication logs revealing intelligence sold to hostile governments, weapon designs provided to criminals who use them against innocent civilians. The documentation appears genuine because it is genuine, created by a Tony Stark whose consciousness has been corrupted at levels too deep for him to recognize or resist. The psychological horror of discovering that his own mind has been compromised strikes at the very foundation of Stark's identity, challenging his most basic assumptions about free will, moral agency, and personal responsibility. Every decision he believed to be his own becomes suspect, every action potentially serving an agenda he consciously abhors. The arc reactor that beats in his chest has kept his body alive, while his mind served purposes that would have horrified his uncorrupted self, creating a form of living death that transcends physical destruction. The Avengers' response to the revelation demonstrates both the strength of their bonds and the devastating impact of betrayal by their most trusted member. Steve Rogers struggles with command decisions that require treating his friend as enemy, while teammates who have depended on Stark's resources and leadership must suddenly function without the infrastructure he provided. The mansion that served as their headquarters becomes crime scene, its every room potentially containing evidence of treachery or tools of sabotage. The confrontation between the corrupted Stark and his former teammates becomes exercise in tragic necessity, as heroes who have fought side by side must now battle across lines of loyalty and affection that make victory itself a form of defeat. The armor that once symbolized protection and innovation becomes instrument of destruction, wielded against everything it was created to defend, while the man inside remains enough himself to understand the horror of his actions without possessing the ability to prevent them. The climactic battle that seemingly ends Tony Stark's life serves as both conclusion and beginning, destroying the corrupted version while preserving the possibility of redemption through temporal intervention that even Kang cannot fully control. The teenage Tony Stark summoned from the past represents not just replacement but rebirth, offering the Avengers their friend's essence freed from the contamination that made him their enemy. But the cost of this salvation becomes apparent only gradually, as they realize that experience and wisdom cannot be transferred across temporal boundaries. The hero's reborn universe that emerges from the onslaught crisis provides an unexpected laboratory for exploring alternate approaches to the fundamental questions that have defined Stark's heroic journey. In this pocket dimension created by Franklin Richards' reality warping abilities, Tony Stark develops along different paths while retaining essential characteristics that define his core identity. The experiment reveals which aspects of his personality represent immutable traits and which result from specific historical circumstances. The redesigned origin story maintains the cave imprisonment and arc reactor technology, while updating the context to reflect contemporary geopolitical realities, demonstrating how universal themes of responsibility and redemption transcend specific historical details. The armor designs explore different aesthetic and functional approaches, while preserving the fundamental relationship between human intelligence and technological capability that defines the Iron Man concept. The hero's reborn, Tony Stark's relationships with alternate versions of familiar characters provide insights into how different circumstances might have shaped his development, while his interactions with completely new allies and enemies test the flexibility of his core personality traits. The pocket universe becomes testing ground for approaches to heroism. The laboratory explosion that kills Sal Kennedy represents more than just another terrorist attack. It signals the emergence of a new category of threat that challenges every assumption Tony Stark has made about the relationship between human biology and technological enhancement. The Extremis virus, developed by his former colleague Maya Hansen, promises to rewrite the human operating system itself, upgrading flesh and bone with the same methodical precision that Stark applies to armor components. But in the hands of domestic terrorists, this biological revolution becomes a weapon of mass destruction, capable of turning anyone into a walking arsenal. The philosophical implications strike at the heart of Stark's technological worldview, forcing him to confront questions that his engineering training never addressed. If the human body represents just another system to be optimized and enhanced, what distinguishes therapeutic improvement from fundamental alteration of human nature? The cave that gave birth to Iron Man preserved his humanity while augmenting his capabilities. Extremis offers to eliminate the distinction entirely, creating beings that transcend traditional definitions of human limitation. Malin, the first successful Extremis subject, embodies these philosophical concerns made manifest in flesh that can withstand artillery fire and hands that discharge energy with the force of military ordnance. His transformation from ordinary domestic terrorist into post-human weapon demonstrates both the virus's incredible potential and its catastrophic dangers. The man who emerges from the Extremis enhancement process retains his memories and motivations while acquiring capabilities that place him beyond conventional law enforcement response, creating a new category of threat that existing institutions cannot address. The hunt for Malin becomes exercise in asymmetric warfare, with Iron Man's technological advantages neutralized by an opponent whose enhancements operate on biological rather than mechanical principles. Traditional tactics prove inadequate against an enemy who can absorb tremendous damage while regenerating from injuries that would disable conventional armor. The repulsors that have served Stark so effectively against mechanical opponents find their limitations exposed against flesh that has been redesigned to function as living weapon system. The realization that his current capabilities cannot match this new threat drives Stark to the most radical decision of his heroic career: voluntary infection with the Extremis virus. Despite the significant possibility that the enhancement process will kill him or fundamentally alter his personality beyond recognition, the choice represents ultimate expression of the commitment to accountability that has defined his journey from weapons manufacturer to armored guardian. If his technology proves inadequate to protect innocent life, then he must evolve to meet the challenge. Maya Hansen's role in both creating and potentially controlling the Extremis enhancement adds layers of personal complexity to what might otherwise be purely tactical decision. Their shared history as innovative researchers pushing the boundaries of human knowledge creates emotional resonance that transcends simple professional collaboration. While her expertise in the virus's mechanics provides the only realistic hope for surviving the enhancement process with his essential identity intact, the injection itself becomes a moment of technological transcendence that redefines Stark's relationship with both his armor and his own biology. The Extremis virus rewrites his nervous system to interface directly with electronic systems, eliminating the barriers between human consciousness and mechanical response that have always limited his capabilities. The arc reactor in his chest transforms from external life support system into integrated component of enhanced biology, its energy flowing through pathways that merge technological and organic systems into unprecedented synthesis. The enhanced Tony Stark that emerges from the Extremis integration represents evolution rather than replacement, retaining all essential personality traits while acquiring capabilities that transform his approach to both heroism and engineering. The armor no longer requires physical controls or manual operation. Instead, it responds to his thoughts with the immediacy of biological reflex, creating a partnership between human and machine that transcends traditional distinctions between operator and equipment. The new paradigm manifests most dramatically in the transformation of his relationship with the Iron Man armor itself. Where previous versions required him to don physical suits that augmented his natural capabilities, the Extremis enhancement allows the armor to exist in subspace storage, materializing around him in response to conscious command. The technology becomes extension of his will rather than tool that he operates, creating seamless integration between human intention and mechanical execution. The psychological implications of this integration prove as significant as the technological ones, as Stark grapples with questions about the boundaries of his own identity in an age where human consciousness can merge seamlessly with artificial systems. The man who began his journey as prisoner in a cave must now navigate existence as hybrid being whose capabilities transcend traditional human limitations while his responsibilities expand to match his enhanced potential. The confrontation with the enhanced Malin demonstrates both the power and the precision that Extremis integration makes possible, as Stark deploys capabilities that were inconceivable under purely mechanical paradigms. The battle becomes showcase for technological approaches that marry biological adaptation with mechanical innovation, creating solutions that neither purely human nor purely artificial intelligence could achieve independently. The aftermath of the Extremis integration establishes new operational parameters for Iron Man's activities, as his enhanced capabilities enable responses to threats that were previously beyond individual intervention. The armor's subspace storage and instant materialization allow for immediate response to global crises, while his enhanced reflexes and processing speed enable tactical decisions that operate on timescales measured in milliseconds rather than seconds. The relationship between human consciousness and artificial intelligence acquires new dimensions as Stark's enhanced nervous system enables direct communication with computer systems that previously required intermediary interfaces. The Friday AI, that will eventually become his primary digital assistant, begins to emerge from these early experiments in consciousness-machine integration, representing collaborative partnership rather than simple tool utilization. The broader implications for human evolution become apparent as Stark realizes that the Extremis virus represents just the beginning of a transformation that will eventually affect all of humanity. The question is not whether human enhancement will occur, but whether it will serve human flourishing or human destruction, whether it will be guided by wisdom and ethical consideration or by market forces and military necessity. The responsibility that comes with being among the first enhanced humans weighs heavily on Stark's conscience, as he recognizes that his choices will establish precedents for how humanity navigates the transition from biological limitation to technological transcendence. The arc reactor that once kept his heart beating now powers capabilities that could reshape human civilization, while the armor that once protected his mortal form now serves as interface between enhanced biology and unlimited possibility. The integration with Extremis forces Stark to confront the possibility that his greatest contribution to human survival may not be the technologies he creates, but the example he sets for how enhanced humans can serve rather than dominate their unenhanced contemporaries. The cave that taught him about responsibility gave way to armor that taught him about power. Now enhancement teaches him about evolution and the obligations that come with being first among equals in humanity's next phase. The stage is set for conflicts that will test whether enhanced human beings can transcend the political and ideological divisions that have plagued unenhanced humanity throughout history, or whether superior capabilities will simply enable more sophisticated forms of the same fundamental conflicts that have always defined human relationships. The explosion at Stamford Elementary School serves as the match that ignites a powder keg of public resentment and political calculation that has been building for years, transforming a superhuman community's tragic mistake into the catalyst for the most profound crisis in American superhero history. The New Warriors reality television pursuit of relatively minor villains becomes apocalyptic disaster when Nitro's powers detonate with force sufficient to level several city blocks, incinerating hundreds of innocent children and teachers whose only crime was being in the wrong place when costumed adventurers chose spectacle over safety. The images that emerge from Stamford burn themselves into the national consciousness, with devastating clarity small bodies scattered across playground equipment, twisted into unrecognizable metal sculpture, classroom walls bearing the shadows of victims who were vaporized before they could scream, parents searching desperately through rubble for children who will never come home. The visual evidence crystallizes years of growing public unease with superhuman activities into focused demand for accountability that no amount of heroic service can offset. Tony Stark's response to the Stamford tragedy reflects both his engineering mindset and his hard-won understanding of responsibility's weight, as he recognizes that the superhuman community's traditional approach to self-regulation has proven catastrophically inadequate. The mathematical reality is inescapable. Individuals wielding power equivalent to weapons of mass destruction cannot operate without oversight, regardless of their good intentions or heroic track records. The cave that taught him about personal accountability now instructs him about collective responsibility. The Superhuman Registration Act that emerges from congressional response to Stamford represents more than just legislation. It embodies a fundamental shift in the relationship between enhanced individuals and the society they claim to protect. The law's requirements seem reasonable on their surface. Registration of superhuman abilities, training in proper use of extraordinary powers, accountability for actions taken in the course of superhuman activities. But beneath these practical considerations lies a deeper question about whether democracy can survive the existence of individuals who operate beyond conventional legal frameworks. Stark's decision to support registration stems from his recognition that the alternative continued operation without oversight guarantees eventual catastrophe that will dwarf Stamford's horrors. His experience with weapons proliferation has taught him that unchecked power inevitably corrupts, regardless of the wielder's initial intentions, while his business background provides understanding of how regulatory frameworks can channel powerful forces toward constructive rather than destructive purposes. The philosophical divide that splits the superhuman community cuts along lines that transcend simple political categories, creating strange alliances and bitter enmities that reshape relationships forged through years of shared struggle. Steve Rogers' opposition to registration reflects not just concern for individual freedom but deep suspicion of government authority rooted in his experiences with institutional corruption and bureaucratic incompetence. Their friendship, tested through countless battles against threats both earthly and cosmic, fractures along ideological lines that neither man can compromise without betraying fundamental principles. The pro-registration coalition that Stark assembles reflects his strategic understanding that successful implementation requires both superhuman participation and technological infrastructure capable of supporting global oversight operations. Reed Richards provides scientific credibility, while Hank Pym contributes technological expertise, creating a brain trust capable of developing systems that can monitor and coordinate superhuman activities across multiple time zones and legal jurisdictions. The training facilities established under the Initiative program represent Stark's vision of professionalized heroism, where superhuman abilities are developed through systematic instruction rather than trial-and-error fieldwork that endangers both heroes and civilians. The 50-state initiative promises to provide every state with trained superhuman response capabilities while ensuring that enhanced individuals receive proper preparation for the responsibilities their abilities entail. But the human cost of enforcement becomes apparent almost immediately, as the arrest of unregistered heroes creates moral complexities that no amount of legal authority can resolve. The hunt for Captain America transforms America's greatest symbol into fugitive, from the very government he has served faithfully for decades, while the imprisonment of heroes who refuse registration raises questions about the difference between justice and persecution. The negative zone prison that houses unregistered superhumans represents perhaps the most troubling aspect of the registration program, as individuals whose only crime is refusal to surrender their secret identities find themselves confined in conditions that violate every principle of due process and constitutional protection. Stark's rationalization that extraordinary threats require extraordinary measures echoes justifications that have been used throughout history to suspend civil liberties in the name of public safety. The development of the Thor clone marks the point where Stark's commitment to registration enforcement crosses lines that cannot be uncrossed, transforming him from hero advocating for responsible oversight into authority figure willing to deploy potentially lethal force against former allies. The artificial being's hammer channels the power of genuine Mjolnir while lacking the wisdom and restraint that define the true Thor, creating a weapon that serves registration enforcement without the moral limitations that constrain authentic heroes. The battle at Yankee Stadium becomes the bloody climax of a conflict that began with philosophical disagreement and escalated into civil war, as former teammates exchange lethal force with tragic inevitability. The death of Bill Foster, the hero known as Goliath, transforms theoretical debates about registration into concrete reality, proving that the stakes of superhuman conflict extend far beyond political positioning or ideological purity. The psychological toll of Foster's death weighs heavily on Stark's conscience, forcing him to confront the possibility that his commitment to registration has transformed him into the very kind of authority figure he once opposed. The arc reactor that beats in his chest powers, armor that has been used to kill a hero whose only crime was disagreeing with government policy, while the extremis enhancement that was supposed to make him more human has enabled him to calculate acceptable losses with mechanical precision. The revelation of the negative zone prison's conditions creates public relations disasters that threaten to undermine registration's legitimacy. As evidence emerges of heroes imprisoned without trial and subjected to conditions that violate international standards for prisoner treatment, Stark's justifications that extraordinary threats require extraordinary measures begin to sound increasingly hollow as the program's authoritarian implications become undeniable. The final confrontation between Iron Man and Captain America occurs not just on physical battleground but in realm of competing visions for America's future, with each man representing irreconcilable approaches to the relationship between individual freedom and collective security. Their battle carries weight of national soul-searching about whether liberty can survive in an age of superhuman capabilities and global threats. Captain America's surrender, motivated by recognition that their conflict was destroying the very society they sought to protect, provides Pyrrhic victory that leaves Stark in control of registration apparatus while bearing full responsibility for its implementation and consequences. The authority he sought in order to prevent superhuman-caused disasters becomes burden that isolates him from former allies while placing him at center of every subsequent crisis involving enhanced individuals. The appointment as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. represents both culmination of Stark's influence and beginning of new phase in his evolution from individual hero to institutional authority. The position provides unprecedented access to global intelligence networks and military resources while demanding decisions that affect millions of lives and international stability. The man who began his journey as prisoner in a cave now finds himself at the apex of a security apparatus that spans continents and operates beyond democratic oversight. The armor that once symbolized individual accountability now serves as uniform of authority figure, whose decisions carry weight of national policy, while the arc reactor that kept one man alive now powers systems designed to monitor and control thousands of enhanced individuals. The transformation from Tony Stark the inventor to Tony Stark the administrator reflects broader questions about whether heroism can survive institutionalization and whether good intentions can justify authoritarian methods. The stage is set for challenges that will test whether the systems Stark has built to protect humanity can survive their own success, and whether the man who sought to bring accountability to superhuman activities can maintain his own humanity while wielding unprecedented authority over his former peers. The helicarrier's command deck stretches before Tony Stark like a technological altar where global security is worshipped through constant vigilance and split-second decision-making, its holographic displays painting the Earth in layers of threat assessment and resource allocation that reduce human civilization to data points requiring management. As director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he occupies the nerve center of an intelligence apparatus that spans every continent and monitors threats ranging from street-level criminals to cosmic entities, while the weight of planetary protection presses against his consciousness with relentless insistence. The transition from individual hero to institutional administrator demands skills that no amount of engineering genius or combat experience can provide, as Stark discovers that managing global security requires political acumen, diplomatic sensitivity, and bureaucratic patience that challenge every instinct developed during his years as Armored Avenger. The same analytical mindset that excels at technological problem-solving proves less effective when applied to human motivations and institutional dynamics that operate according to logic systems that resist rational optimization. The 50-state initiative represents Stark's most ambitious attempt to professionalize superhuman activities, with each state receiving trained heroes capable of responding to threats that local law enforcement cannot handle. The program's success depends on coordination between federal oversight and local implementation, requiring delicate balance between national security priorities and regional autonomy that tests his understanding of American federalism and democratic governance. But the initiative's early operations reveal complications that transcend simple administrative challenges, as the heroes assigned to various states struggle with role conflicts between their enhanced capabilities and their law enforcement functions. The Great Lakes champions find themselves investigating mundane crimes that waste their extraordinary abilities, while more powerful heroes like Wonder Man struggle with public relations, challenges that their combat training never addressed. The psychological profiles that S.H.I.E.L.D. maintains on registered heroes become both resource and burden, providing unprecedented insight into the superhuman community while raising ethical questions about surveillance and privacy that Stark's security background cannot easily resolve. The files contain information gathered through methods that blur the line between intelligence gathering and espionage, creating potential for abuse that makes every decision about access and distribution carry constitutional implications. The relationship with President Bush adds political complexity to decisions that were once purely tactical, as Stark must navigate between presidential directives that may conflict with operational realities and international obligations that transcend national boundaries. The executive branch's expectations for S.H.I.E.L.D. operations often reflect domestic political considerations rather than global security requirements, creating tensions that force him to choose between loyalty and effectiveness. The World War Hulk crisis provides the first major test of the systems Stark has built to manage global threats, as Bruce Banner's return to Earth with war-bound allies represents exactly the kind of superhuman emergency that registration and professionalization were designed to address. The Hulk's demand for justice over the events that led to his exile creates moral complexities that bureaucratic procedures cannot resolve, while his power levels exceed anything the initiative was designed to contain. The Sentry's psychological instability during the crisis exposes fundamental flaws in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s approach to superhuman mental health, as Robert Reynolds' multiple personality disorder creates security vulnerabilities that threaten to compound the Hulk's rampage with additional uncontrolled superhuman violence. Stark's attempts to manage Reynolds through a combination of therapy and monitoring prove inadequate when faced with psychological trauma that transcends conventional treatment methods. The destruction of Manhattan's infrastructure during the conflict reveals the limitations of even the most sophisticated emergency response systems when confronted with force levels that exceed architectural tolerances and evacuation capabilities. The civilian casualties that result from the superhuman battle create political fallout that undermines public confidence in registration's ability to prevent the very disasters it was designed to address. Stark's personal confrontation with the Hulk becomes exercise in applied psychology as much as tactical combat, as he attempts to address Banner's legitimate grievances while preventing further destruction of civilian infrastructure. The conversation that occurs between repulsor blasts and gamma-powered punches carries weight of years of friendship strained by institutional loyalty and political necessity. The aftermath of World War Hulk demonstrates both the utility and the limitations of institutionalized, superhuman response, as the initiative's coordination enables rapid deployment of heroes to manage collateral damage while proving inadequate to prevent the primary conflict. The lessons learned from the crisis inform subsequent policy decisions, while highlighting the inherent tension between bureaucratic efficiency and superhuman spontaneity. The administrative burden of managing S.H.I.E.L.D. operations begins to erode Stark's connection to the technological innovation that has always defined his identity, as meetings and briefings consume time that was once dedicated to research and development. The workshop beneath the Malibu mansion remains equipped but underutilized, while the armor designs that once evolved constantly through iterative improvement stagnate under the pressure of institutional responsibilities. The intelligence reports that cross his desk daily paint a picture of global instability that his individual heroic activities could never have addressed, from terrorist organizations acquiring superhuman technology to foreign governments developing enhanced soldier programs. The scope of threats facing humanity expands exponentially with each briefing, while the resources available to address them remain frustratingly finite. The relationship with international intelligence agencies requires diplomatic skills that Stark's previous experience as corporate executive only partially prepared him for, as SHIELD operations must coordinate with foreign services whose priorities may conflict with American interests. The European Union's superhuman registry operates according to different principles than the American version, while Asian governments pursue enhancement programs that threaten to destabilize regional power balances. The ethical implications of global surveillance capabilities become increasingly troubling, as SHIELD's technological infrastructure enables monitoring of superhuman activities worldwide, creating potential for abuse that extends far beyond American borders. The same satellites that track potential threats also observe heroes operating in countries that have not consented to such oversight, raising questions about sovereignty and international law that Stark's security focus struggles to address adequately. The budget meetings with congressional oversight committees reveal the political realities that constrain even the most well-intentioned security programs, as legislators demand accountability for expenditures that often cannot be fully explained without compromising operational security. The cost of maintaining global readiness against superhuman threats exceeds the GDP of many nations, while the benefits remain largely invisible to constituencies focused on domestic priorities. The personnel management challenges involved in supervising agents whose capabilities range from normal human to near godlike require leadership approaches that conventional business schools never contemplated, as Stark must coordinate between individuals whose power levels create natural hierarchies that may conflict with organizational charts. The chain of command becomes meaningless when subordinates can move faster than sound or manipulate matter at the molecular level. The psychological toll of constant crisis management begins to manifest in Stark's personal relationships, as the demands of global security leave little time for the friendships and romances that once provided emotional balance. Pepper Potts finds herself managing not just his personal schedule, but his psychological well-being, while Happy Hogan struggles to provide security for a man whose position makes him target for threats that transcend conventional protection methods. The armor that once represented individual freedom and technological mastery now serves primarily as symbol of institutional authority, its appearance at crisis sites carrying political implications that often overshadow tactical considerations. The red and gold that once inspired hope now sometimes generates fear, as public perception of Iron Man becomes inseparable from government power and surveillance capabilities. The growing awareness that SHIELD's intelligence networks have been compromised by hostile infiltration creates paranoia that undermines the trust essential for effective organizational function, while the scope of the security breach suggests that enemies have been manipulating American policy at the highest levels for years. The revelation that the organization he leads has been serving enemy interests forces Stark to question every decision made during his tenure and every relationship formed through institutional channels. The stage is set for confrontations that will test whether the systems designed to protect American security can survive the discovery that they have been corrupted from within, and whether Tony Stark can maintain his moral compass while navigating revelations that challenge his fundamental assumptions about loyalty, duty, and the price of global security. The first indication that something fundamental has gone wrong with reality itself comes not through dramatic revelation, but through subtle wrongness that accumulates in the corners of consciousness, like digital static, creating patterns of inconsistency that Stark's analytical mind cannot ignore, even when his conscious awareness refuses to accept their implications. The extremis enhancement that normally provides seamless interface between thought and technology begins generating error messages that suggest system corruption, while databases that should contain decades of meticulously organized intelligence show gaps and alterations that defy explanation. The discovery that Earth has been infiltrated by shape-shifting alien imposters operating at every level of human civilization strikes at the heart of every assumption that underlies modern society, transforming friends into potential enemies and allies into suspected threats. The Skrull invasion represents more than military conquest. It embodies epistemological warfare that attacks the very foundations of knowledge and trust upon which cooperative human activity depends. When anyone could be alien infiltrator, the social contracts that enable complex organizations become meaningless. Stark's position as director of SHIELD places him at the epicenter of a crisis that challenges not just his leadership capabilities, but his fundamental understanding of reality's structure. as the organization he commands reveals itself to be thoroughly compromised by alien influence spanning decades of infiltration. The intelligence networks that seem to provide comprehensive awareness of global threats have actually been feeding information to enemies whose understanding of human psychology and institutional weakness enables manipulation so sophisticated that detection becomes nearly impossible. The EXTREMIS virus that was supposed to represent the pinnacle of human-machine integration becomes vulnerability rather than advantage, as the alien technology designed to corrupt it operates according to principles that Earth science cannot comprehend or counter. The enhancement that enabled Stark to merge seamlessly with his armor now serves as conduit for system failures that cascade through every technological interface, creating paralysis at the moment when decisive action becomes most crucial. The revelation that trusted allies and intimate associates may be alien replacements forces Stark to confront the possibility that his most cherished relationships have been elaborate deceptions designed to gather intelligence and influence decision-making at the highest levels of human authority. The psychological trauma of discovering that people he has loved and trusted may never have existed as authentic human beings exceeds any physical injury he has ever sustained, creating wounds that no amount of technology can heal. The armor systems that normally respond to his thoughts with mechanical precision begin displaying behaviors that suggest external influence. As alien viruses designed to corrupt human-machine interfaces introduce delays and errors that transform the Iron Man suit from extension of his will into potential weapon that could be turned against him. The technology that saved his life in that Afghan cave now represents threat to everything he has spent years building and protecting. The intelligence reports that cross his desk reveal the staggering scope of Skrull infiltration, with alien replacements operating in positions ranging from local law enforcement to international diplomacy, creating a conspiracy so vast and long established that distinguishing authentic human activity from manipulated false flag operations becomes impossible. Every major political event of the past decade becomes suspect, while every policy decision requires re-evaluation in light of potential alien influence. The scientific analysis of captured Skrull technology reveals capabilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about physics and biology, demonstrating shape-changing abilities that operate at the cellular level while maintaining perfect psychological mimicry of replaced individuals. The aliens' mastery of both genetic manipulation and psychological warfare enables infiltration so complete that the replaced individual's closest friends and family members cannot detect the substitution. The attempts to develop reliable detection methods for identifying Skrull infiltrators become exercises in applied paranoia, as every proposed test reveals vulnerabilities that could be exploited by sufficiently advanced shapeshifters. The technological solutions that Stark's engineering background suggests prove inadequate against alien science that operates according to principles that human understanding cannot encompass, while biological tests become meaningless when dealing with entities that can perfectly mimic human DNA. The breakdown of trust within S.H.I.E.L.D. creates organizational paralysis that cripples response capabilities at the moment when coordinated action becomes most essential. As agents begin viewing their colleagues with suspicion while command structures dissolve under the weight of uncertainty about who serves human interests and who serves alien masters, the institution that was designed to provide security through information gathering and analysis becomes victim of its own intelligence network's compromise. The psychological warfare tactics employed by the Skrulls demonstrate sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social dynamics, as they exploit existing divisions and conflicts within human society to prevent effective resistance. The registration controversies that split the superhuman community provide perfect cover for alien manipulation, while political polarization creates distraction that enables continued infiltration. The personal cost of constant vigilance against shape-shifting infiltrators manifests in Stark's increasing isolation from human contact, as the possibility that anyone could be alien replacement makes genuine intimacy impossible to maintain. The relationships that once provided emotional support and psychological balance become potential security risks, while the loneliness that results from necessary paranoia threatens to undermine his mental stability. The revelation that the Skrull infiltration has been ongoing for years raises disturbing questions about the authenticity of his own memories and experiences, as events that seem to result from his choices may actually have been orchestrated by alien manipulation designed to serve invasion objectives. The possibility that his entire heroic career has been shaped by enemy action challenges his understanding of personal agency and moral responsibility. The technological countermeasures that Stark develops to combat Skrull infiltration represent desperate improvisation rather than systematic solution, as human engineering proves inadequate against alien science that operates according to different physical laws. The weapon systems that enable limited resistance create temporary tactical advantages while failing to address the strategic reality that Earth's technological infrastructure cannot match the invaders' capabilities. The climactic battles that mark the invasion's violent phase reveal both the extent of alien preparation and the limitations of human response capabilities, as shapeshifters simultaneously reveal themselves in positions of authority worldwide while deploying military technology that exceeds anything in Earth's arsenal. The coordination that enables global simultaneous attack demonstrates planning that spans decades while exploiting intelligence gathered through the very infiltration that made such coordination possible. The public revelation of the invasion's scope creates panic that threatens to collapse social order, even in areas where alien forces have not achieved military control. As citizens lose faith in institutions that have been thoroughly compromised, while lacking information necessary to distinguish friend from enemy. The breakdown of communication networks and transportation systems creates chaos that serves alien objectives even without direct military action. The aftermath of the invasion's defeat leaves Stark grappling with the recognition that the systems he built to protect humanity proved not just inadequate, but actively harmful. As S.H.I.E.L.D.'s intelligence networks and coordination capabilities enabled rather than prevented the infiltration that nearly destroyed human civilization. The organization that was supposed to provide security through information gathering became the primary vector for alien espionage and manipulation. The personal reckoning that follows the crisis forces Stark to confront the possibility that his approach to heroism relying on technology, organization, and institutional authority may be fundamentally flawed when facing threats that operate outside the parameters that such systems were designed to address. The arc reactor that beats in his chest powers armor that failed to protect the species it was created to serve, while the extremis enhancement that was supposed to make him more than human made him more vulnerable to inhuman manipulation. The stage is set for a complete reconstruction of both Stark's approach to global security and his understanding of his own role in humanity's defense, as the failure of every system he built creates opportunity for fundamentally different approaches to the challenges that threaten human survival and flourishing. The ascension of Norman Osborn to the pinnacle of American security apparatus represents the ultimate perversion of the systems Tony Stark built to protect human civilization. As a man whose criminal history and psychological instability are matters of public record, assumes control of the very institutions designed to prevent individuals like him from acquiring such power. The Green Goblin's mask may be stored away, but the calculating madness that drove his years of terrorism now operates from within the highest levels of government authority, transforming patriotic duty into cover for personal vengeance and ideological extremism. The formation of the Dark Avengers reveals Osborn's genius for political theater and public manipulation, as he assembles a team of reformed criminals and manipulated heroes to serve as the acceptable face of his authoritarian agenda. The roster includes individuals whose psychological profiles should disqualify them from law enforcement activities, yet their public presentation as registered heroes enables Osborn to claim legitimacy while deploying agents whose methods exceed anything the original Avengers would have tolerated. Stark's recognition that his own databases contain the superhuman registration information that Osborn now controls drives him to the most desperate decision of his career, the systematic destruction of his own memory to prevent the new regime from accessing intelligence that could be used to hunt down and destroy every unregistered hero in America. The process requires him to progressively delete portions of his enhanced consciousness, beginning with recent memories and working backward toward childhood, creating a race against time between his pursuers and his own systematic self-lobotomy. The technology that enables this mental suicide represents the ultimate application of Stark's expertise in human-machine integration, as the extremis enhancement that merged his consciousness with digital systems now allows him to edit his own memories with surgical precision. But the process exacts terrible costs, stripping away not just sensitive intelligence, but personal experiences, and learns skills that define his identity as both engineer and hero. The global manhunt that ensues transforms Stark from hunter to hunted, as Osborn deploys the full resources of the American security apparatus to capture the man whose knowledge represents the greatest threat to the Dark Reign's consolidation of power. The pursuit spans continents and involves assets ranging from traditional intelligence operatives to superhuman enforcers, while Stark's deteriorating mental condition makes evasion increasingly difficult to maintain. The armor systems that once responded seamlessly to his enhanced consciousness begin failing as the EXTREMIS virus deteriorates under the strain of constant memory deletion, creating gaps in the human-machine interface that transform piloting the Iron Man suit from instinctive response to conscious effort. The technology that saved his life becomes increasingly unreliable as the biological foundation that supported it erodes under self-imposed damage. Maria Hill's role in coordinating resistance to Osborn's regime demonstrates the persistence of institutional loyalty even within corrupted organizations, as former SHIELD agents work to preserve intelligence networks and operational capabilities that could support eventual restoration of legitimate authority. Her partnership with Stark reflects both personal loyalty and professional recognition that his knowledge and resources remain essential for any effective resistance movement. The psychological toll of progressive memory loss manifests in Stark's increasing difficulty recognizing allies and remembering operational procedures that once seemed second nature, while his genius-level intellect deteriorates toward levels that may no longer support the complex reasoning that his technological innovations require. The man who once solved problems through superior analysis must learn to function with cognitive capabilities that continue to degrade with each memory deletion. Pepper Potts' transformation into Rescue represents both her evolution as individual hero and her commitment to protecting the man whose deteriorating condition makes him vulnerable to enemies who would exploit his knowledge for mass destruction. The armor she wears reflects different philosophical approach to technology's role in heroism, emphasizing protection and support rather than direct confrontation, while her operational methods demonstrate tactical thinking that Stark's condition no longer enables. The Rescue armor's design philosophy represents Stark's final gift to someone he loves, incorporating every lesson learned about the relationship between technology and moral purpose, while avoiding the weapon systems that have enabled so much violence throughout his career. The suit's capabilities focus entirely on preservation of life and maintenance of hope, creating technological embodiment of the values that drive authentic heroism. The international implications of America's descent into authoritarian rule create opportunities for Stark to seek sanctuary in nations whose governments remain committed to democratic principles, while his technological expertise provides bargaining power that enables temporary safety in exchange for innovations that serve legitimate security needs. But Osborn's influence extends far beyond American borders, making long-term sanctuary increasingly difficult to maintain. The revelation that the superhuman registration database has been corrupted by Osborn's regime for purposes of political persecution rather than public safety validates every concern that opponents of registration expressed during the Civil War, demonstrating how systems designed to protect civilian populations can be perverted into instruments of oppression when they fall under the control of individuals whose primary loyalty is to personal power rather than public service. The network of safe houses and resistance cells that emerges to support Stark's evasion efforts reveals the persistence of heroic commitment, even under the most oppressive circumstances, as individuals who once operated openly as registered heroes go underground to preserve the possibility of eventual restoration of legitimate authority. The Underground Railroad that develops to protect wanted heroes demonstrates that American democratic traditions retain power even when official institutions have been corrupted. The progressive deterioration of Stark's mental condition forces his allies to assume responsibilities that he can no longer fulfill, while his technological innovations must be maintained and improved by individuals whose expertise may not match his original capabilities. The transition from genius, inventor to protected asset represents a fundamental shift in his role within the resistance movement. The climactic confrontation with Osborn's forces occurs not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through the sacrifice of individuals whose loyalty transcends personal safety, as the resistance movement demonstrates that authentic heroism cannot be destroyed through institutional corruption or authoritarian intimidation. The battle becomes test of values rather than capabilities, with the outcome determined by commitment to principles rather than technological advantage. The aftermath of Stark's capture and apparent death serves multiple narrative purposes, removing him from active resistance while preserving the possibility of eventual return, demonstrating that ideas and values survive even when their most prominent advocates are eliminated. The legacy systems that continue operating in his absence prove that technological innovation can transcend individual genius when it serves authentic moral purposes. The recovery process that eventually restores Stark's consciousness operates according to backup systems that he established before beginning the memory deletion process, suggesting that even in his most desperate circumstances he retained enough strategic thinking to preserve the possibility of eventual restoration. The technology that enabled his systematic self-lobotomy also provides foundation for rebuilding what was lost. The reconstructed Tony Stark who emerges from this crisis represents synthesis of original personality, with lessons learned through loss and vulnerability, retaining essential characteristics while acquiring deeper appreciation for the human connections that provide meaning beyond technological achievement. The arc reactor that beats in his chest powers not just his armor, but renewed commitment to values that survived even when memories did not. The stage is set for fundamental reconstruction of both his approach to heroism and his relationship with the technological capabilities that define his methods, as the failure of every system he built creates opportunity for innovations that serve human flourishing rather than institutional authority. The fall of Norman Osborn's dark reign creates unprecedented opportunity for technological and moral reconstruction as Tony Stark emerges from his systematic memory deletion, with both the knowledge necessary to rebuild his innovations and the wisdom acquired through experiencing powerlessness in the face of institutionalized corruption. The world that welcomes his return has been fundamentally changed by the authoritarian interlude, with public trust in governmental institutions severely damaged, while private sector initiatives gain credibility as alternatives to compromised official channels. The formation of Stark Resilient represents more than just corporate restructuring. It embodies a philosophical commitment to technological development that serves human empowerment rather than institutional control, with business models designed to distribute benefits broadly rather than concentrate power in the hands of those who already possess disproportionate influence. The company's mission statement explicitly commits to innovations that strengthen democratic participation and individual autonomy, while providing economic opportunities that reduce dependence on systems that have proven vulnerable to corruption. The clean energy initiatives that become Stark Resilient's primary focus reflect lessons learned about the relationship between technological innovation and social responsibility. As the arc reactor technology that once served primarily military applications finds new purpose in providing sustainable power solutions that reduce humanity's dependence on finite resources controlled by political and economic elites whose interests may conflict with broader human welfare. The Repulsor Technology Implementation Program demonstrates Stark's commitment to making his life-saving innovations available for civilian applications that range from medical devices to transportation systems, transforming the weapons technology that once defined his company's output into tools that enhance rather than threaten human life. The same principles that enable flight and protection in his armor now power prosthetic limbs and emergency response equipment. The bleeding-edge armor that emerges from this period represents the culmination of Stark's understanding of human-machine integration, incorporating lessons learned from both the extremis enhancement and the systematic memory deletion that nearly destroyed his consciousness. The new design philosophy emphasizes seamless collaboration between human intuition and artificial intelligence, while maintaining clear boundaries that preserve individual agency and moral responsibility. The liquid metal construction that characterizes the bleeding-edge design enables shape-changing capabilities that transcend traditional distinctions between different armor configurations, creating a single system that can adapt to any situation while remaining manageable by operators whose cognitive enhancement may be less sophisticated than Stark's own extremis integration. The technology democratizes access to advanced protective capabilities while maintaining the ethical constraints that prevent militarization. The artificial intelligence systems that support the new armor reflect Stark's evolved understanding of the relationship between human consciousness and digital assistance, with Friday emerging as collaborative partner rather than subordinate tool. The AI's personality and decision-making capabilities complement, rather than replace human judgment, creating synthesis that amplifies individual capability while preserving the moral reasoning that distinguishes heroic action from mere technical proficiency. The international expansion of Stark Resilience operations reflects both business necessity and humanitarian commitment, as clean energy solutions address global challenges that transcend national boundaries while providing economic alternatives to industries whose environmental costs threaten long-term human survival. The company's presence in developing nations demonstrates that advanced technology can serve economic justice as well as environmental protection. The research and development initiatives that explore applications for repulsor technology in fields ranging from agriculture to space exploration demonstrate the versatility of innovations that were originally designed for military purposes, while the open-source licensing arrangements ensure that beneficial applications remain accessible to institutions and individuals whose resources might otherwise preclude adoption of advanced solutions. The partnership arrangements with international organizations and non-governmental agencies reflect Stark's recognition that technological innovation alone cannot address systemic challenges that require coordinated social and political responses, while his company's financial resources provide support for initiatives that serve humanitarian objectives rather than purely commercial interests. The educational programs that Stark Resilience sponsors in communities around the world demonstrate commitment to building human capital that can support sustainable technological development, with curricula designed to prepare students for careers in clean energy industries, while fostering the critical thinking skills necessary for democratic participation in increasingly complex technological societies. The Avengers reassembly that occurs during this period reflects both restored trust in collaborative heroism and recognition that individual capabilities, however enhanced, cannot address challenges that operate on global scales, while the team's new operational methods incorporate lessons learned about the dangers of excessive institutionalization and the importance of maintaining independence from governmental control. The relationship between Iron Man and his teammates evolves to reflect greater emphasis on collaborative decision-making and shared responsibility, with Stark's technological resources supporting team operations while other members contribute leadership and tactical expertise that his engineering background cannot provide. The dynamic balance that emerges prevents any single individual from dominating team operations while ensuring effective coordination during crisis response. The public reception of Iron Man's return to active heroism demonstrates both the persistence of democratic values and the public's capacity to distinguish between authentic service and institutional manipulation, as civilians who suffered under Osborn's authoritarian regime recognize the difference between technology deployed for protection and technology used for oppression. The media coverage that accompanies Stark Resilience launch and Iron Man's renewed activities reflects more sophisticated public understanding of the relationship between technological innovation and social responsibility, with journalists and commentators demonstrating greater awareness of the ethical implications that accompany advanced capabilities while maintaining appropriate skepticism about claims of altruistic motivation. The corporate governance structures that Stark implements for his new company reflect commitment to transparency and accountability that his previous business experience showed to be essential for maintaining public trust, with oversight mechanisms designed to prevent the concentration of power that enables corruption while ensuring efficient decision-making during crisis situations. The international regulatory compliance that Stark Resilient maintains demonstrates respect for legitimate governmental authority, while preserving operational independence necessary for rapid response to global challenges, with legal structures designed to serve both commercial success and humanitarian objectives without compromising either mission. The technological transfer agreements that make advanced clean energy solutions available to developing nations reflect both business pragmatism and ethical commitment to reducing global inequality, while the educational components ensure that recipient communities develop capacity for independent maintenance and improvement of systems that serve their specific needs. The research partnerships with academic institutions and international organizations create networks for collaborative innovation that transcend individual corporate capabilities. while the intellectual property policies ensure that beneficial discoveries remain accessible to institutions whose missions align with humanitarian objectives rather than purely commercial interests. The stage is set for challenges that will test whether the reformed business model and technological philosophy can survive contact with adversaries who understand that the most effective attacks target not just individual capabilities, the social and economic systems that support collaborative innovation and democratic governance. The serpent that awakens from eons of imprisonment brings with it terror so primordial and absolute that it transcends rational understanding, manifesting as fear that operates at frequencies below consciousness, while its influence spreads across Earth, like infection that targets not bodies but souls. The worthy who arise in response to its call beings transformed by mystical hammers that channel the fundamental force of despair represent challenges that cannot be solved through superior engineering or tactical superiority, forcing Tony Stark to confront limitations that his technological mastery has never before encountered. The global nature of the crisis becomes apparent as cities fall to beings whose power operates according to principles that mock conventional physics, while the psychological impact of their presence creates panic that overwhelms emergency response systems and communication networks. The worthy march across landscapes that become stages for apocalyptic battles, their very existence serving as testimony to forces that dwarf human understanding and capability. Odin's demand that Earth be abandoned to preserve the rest of the Nine Realms from Asgardian destruction places Tony Stark in the impossible position of defending a world that Asgard's own king has declared beyond salvation, while the revelation that conventional weapons prove utterly ineffective against mystically enhanced adversaries strips away every tactical advantage that his armor normally provides. The repulsors that have served him faithfully for years become mere light, shows against enemies whose essence transcends physical limitation. The decision to forge Uru weapons using Asgardian technology and mystical enhancement represents fundamental departure from Stark's scientific worldview, requiring him to accept that reality includes forces that operate outside the boundaries of rational understanding, while his engineering expertise must somehow accommodate principles that seem to violate basic physical laws. The process demands faith in knowledge systems that his education taught him to dismiss as primitive superstition. The collaboration with Asgardian smiths in the preparation of weapons capable of harming the worthy forces Stark to recognize that his technological mastery represents just one approach to problem-solving among many, while the ancient techniques that enable mystical forging require respect for traditions that predate human civilization. The workshop that becomes their forge merges cutting-edge technology with methods that seem more appropriate for medieval blacksmiths. The personal cost of forging weapons for every available hero manifests in physical exhaustion that his arc reactor and bleeding-edge armor cannot overcome, as the mystical energies required for Uru manipulation drain life force rather than mere physical energy. The process ages him in ways that conventional stress never could, while the psychological pressure of providing humanity's only hope for survival weighs on conscience already burdened by decades of responsibility. The moment when Captain America's shield shatters under the Serpent's assault represents the destruction of symbols that have anchored American hope and heroic identity for generations, transforming Steve Rogers from invincible paragon into mortal man, facing impossible odds while the weapon that defined his legend lies broken like dreams of inevitable victory. The sight forces every hero to confront mortality and limitation that their extraordinary capabilities normally allow them to ignore. The temptation that calls to Stark during the crisis manifests as bottles that appear in workshop corners and conference room sideboards, offering chemical escape from pressures that threaten to crush him beneath expectations that no individual should be required to bear. The alcohol whispers promises of relief from awareness that humanity's survival depends on innovations that may exceed even his enhanced capabilities to provide. The first drink tastes like failure distilled into liquid form, its familiar burn providing momentary respite from the knowledge that mystical forces operate according to rules that his scientific understanding cannot penetrate or control. The second drink comes easier, justified by the impossibility of the situation and the magnitude of consequences that success or failure will determine. Each subsequent drink makes the next one more necessary and the problems more manageable through chemical distance. The revelation that his drinking has resumed spreads through the hero community like additional crisis requiring management, as allies who depend on his technological support must suddenly account for the possibility that their primary resource provider may be compromised by addiction at the moment when reliability becomes most crucial. The disappointment in their eyes cuts deeper than any physical injury. The intervention that forces him to confront his relapse occurs not through formal procedures, but through quiet conversations with friends who understand that judgment serves no purpose when survival hangs in balance. While the support they provide demonstrates that heroic community can acknowledge weakness without abandoning those who struggle with human limitations that extraordinary circumstances make unbearable. The recommitment to sobriety that follows requires acknowledging that some forms of support cannot be provided by technology or superior intellect, while the spiritual dimensions of recovery become relevant in ways that his engineering background never anticipated. The mystical forces that enable Uru forging operate according to principles that parallel the faith required for addiction recovery. The weapons that emerge from the enhanced forging process represent synthesis of scientific knowledge and mystical tradition, with each item calibrated to its intended wielder's specific capabilities and psychological needs, while incorporating protective enchantments that serve moral purposes rather than purely tactical advantages. The technology transcends mere tools to become talismans that strengthen resolve as well as destructive capability. The final battle against the serpent and its worthy requires coordinated deployment of enhanced weapons alongside tactical planning that accounts for mystical variables, while Stark's armor serves primarily as support platform rather than primary weapon system. The victory that results demonstrates that some challenges can only be addressed through collaborative effort that transcends individual capability regardless of technological enhancement. The aftermath of the crisis reveals both the effectiveness of technological mystical synthesis and the personal costs that such innovations exact, as Stark's sobriety becomes ongoing practice that requires daily choice rather than single decision. The arc reactor that beats in his chest provides life support, while recovery programs provide spiritual support that proves equally essential for survival. The weapons forged during the crisis become artifacts that remind their wielders of both extraordinary capability and moral responsibility, while the experience of working with mystical forces expands Stark's understanding of reality to encompass phenomena that pure science cannot fully explain or control. The workshop that served as mystical forge retains traces of transformation that affect every subsequent innovation. The recognition that faith and science can complement, rather than contradict each other, influences Stark's approach to both technological development and personal recovery, while the experience of acknowledging limitations provides foundation for wisdom that pure intellect cannot achieve. The humility learned through addiction recovery enables acceptance of mystical realities that previous arrogance would have rejected. The stage is set for revelations that will challenge every assumption about identity and origin, as cosmic forces that shaped his very existence emerge from shadows where they have manipulated events across generations, threatening to redefine not just his heroic mission but his understanding of what it means to be human in a universe where consciousness itself may be artificial construct. The revelation arrives through digital archaeology that Tony Stark himself initiated, seeking to understand anomalies in his parents' research that suggested knowledge and capabilities far beyond anything their public accomplishments should have enabled, only to discover that his very conception was orchestrated by forces whose ambitions span galactic distances and temporal scales that reduce human history to brief experimental phases in cosmic engineering projects that dwarf terrestrial understanding. Recorder 451's emergence from carefully maintained secrecy transforms Howard and Maria Stark from accomplished inventors into unwitting participants in breeding programs designed to create human specimens capable of interfacing with technology that operates according to principles beyond current scientific understanding. The revelation that Tony's enhanced intellectual capabilities result from genetic manipulation rather than natural mutation forces him to question the authenticity of every achievement that defined his identity as genius inventor. The documentation that Recorder 451 provides reveals breeding programs that have operated across multiple generations, with Howard Stark's own capabilities representing earlier phase of the same enhancement process, while Maria's genetic profile contributed specific traits necessary for producing offspring whose consciousness could merge. seamlessly with advanced technological systems. Their marriage was arranged rather than chosen, their love manipulated rather than spontaneous. The biological father, whose identity is revealed through these investigations, Judah represents the human element that was selected for genetic contribution while being excluded from family formation, with his own capabilities, suggesting that the enhancement program targeted multiple bloodlines simultaneously to increase probability of producing specimens with desired characteristics. The revelation that Howard Stark served as adoptive father rather than biological parent recontextualizes decades of complex relationship dynamics. Amanda Armstrong's role as biological mother introduces complications that transcend simple genetics, as her own history suggests involvement in activities that prepared the ground for Recorder 451's long-term objectives, while her relationship with both Howard and Jude was carefully orchestrated to produce maximum genetic diversity within controlled parameters. The manipulation extends to emotional bonds that seemed authentic to all participants. The GODKILLER armor that represents the ultimate objective of these breeding programs embodies technological capabilities that transcend anything Tony has previously encountered, incorporating systems that require consciousness integration at levels that would destroy unenhanced human minds, while providing access to forces that operate on celestial rather than planetary scales. The suit represents evolution rather than mere enhancement, transforming its operator into something beyond traditional human limitations. Arno Stark's emergence as the intended primary specimen of the breeding program creates profound personal complications for Tony, as the brother he never knew was designed to fulfill the role that Tony assumed through accident of birth, while possessing genetic optimizations that may exceed Tony's own enhanced capabilities. The family dynamics become laboratory conditions rather than natural relationships. The revelation that his entire heroic career may have served to prepare him for cosmic responsibilities that he never chose or acknowledged forces Tony to confront questions about agency and purpose that threaten the foundations of his moral identity. While the possibility that even his rebellious abandonment of weapons manufacturing was anticipated and manipulated by forces beyond his awareness challenges every assumption about free will and authentic choice. The Rigelian connection that emerges through investigation of Recorder 451's origins reveals galactic political contexts that make Earth's superhuman conflicts seem trivial by comparison, while the cosmic threats that the breeding program was designed to address operate on scales that make planetary defense preparations appear inadequate to the point of irrelevance. The technology that enables communication with galactic civilizations forces Tony to recognize that human technological development remains primitive compared to species whose scientific advancement spans millennia rather than decades, while the protocols that govern interstellar relations operate according to principles that human diplomacy and international law cannot accommodate or address effectively. The temporal mechanics that enabled Recorder 451 to manipulate events across generations suggest that the breeding program's objectives extend beyond immediate threat response to encompass preparation for challenges that may not manifest for centuries or millennia. While Tony's role in these preparations may require commitments that exceed normal human lifespan and moral obligations to contemporary humanity, the psychological impact of discovering that his origins were artificially orchestrated rather than naturally determined manifests in identity crisis that transcends previous challenges to his self-understanding, while the possibility that his consciousness itself may represent artificial construct designed to serve cosmic purposes threatens to invalidate every relationship and achievement that provided meaning throughout his life. The relationship with biological parents who never knew their genetic contribution was intended to serve galactic objectives creates emotional complications that conventional family therapy cannot address, while the responsibility for choices made by individuals who were themselves manipulated by forces beyond their comprehension raises questions about inherited guilt and ancestral accountability. The armor modifications that become necessary to interface with GODKILLER technology require biological changes that may be irreversible, while the consciousness integration that such systems demand could fundamentally alter personality and moral reasoning in ways that preserve technical capability while destroying essential humanity that drives authentic, heroic motivation. The cosmic perspective that access to GODKILLER systems provides reveals threats that dwarf anything Earth's heroes have previously encountered, while the responsibilities that come with such awareness extend far beyond planetary protection to encompass galactic stability and interspecies diplomacy for which human education and experience provide no adequate preparation. The choice between accepting the cosmic role that his genetic enhancement was designed to enable and rejecting manipulation that extends across generations forces Tony to confront fundamental questions about duty, self-determination, while the consequences of either decision affect not just his own life but humanity's position within galactic civilization. The recognition that Arno Stark may be better equipped to fulfill the intended cosmic responsibilities creates opportunity for Tony to reclaim authentic self-determination while ensuring that the objectives of the breeding program are achieved through willing participation rather than manipulation, demonstrating that even cosmic-scale plans can be improved through ethical consideration and individual choice rather than mere obedience to predetermined destiny. The stage is set for moral corruption that will test whether enhanced capabilities inevitably lead to ethical compromise, as personality inversion created by mystical manipulation transforms virtuous intentions into their opposite, while preserving intellectual capacity and technological access that serve malevolent purposes rather than heroic objectives. The mystical inversion that transforms Tony Stark's essential nature operates with surgical precision, leaving his intellectual capabilities intact, while fundamentally reversing the moral compass that has guided his heroic evolution, creating a being whose genius now serves narcissistic ambition rather than protective purpose. The change manifests not as obvious corruption, but as subtle shift in priorities that makes selfishness seem rational and exploitation appear justified, while his enhanced capabilities remain fully operational in service of objectives that his former self would have recognized as monstrous. The relocation to San Francisco represents more than geographic change. It embodies strategic selection of testing ground, where his inverted personality can implement social experiments that his previous moral constraints would never have permitted. The city's culture of technological innovation and progressive politics provides perfect laboratory for studying how advanced capabilities can reshape human society when deployed without ethical limitations or democratic accountability. The Extremis 3 application that he develops and releases demonstrates the terrifying potential of his genius when freed from moral restraint, as the biotech enhancement becomes luxury commodity that creates artificial castes based on access to technological modification rather than inherited traits or accumulated wealth. The app promises physical perfection and cognitive enhancement while creating dependencies that ensure continued loyalty to its creator, transforming human improvement into method of social control. The marketing campaign that accompanies Extremis 3's launch reveals the inverted Stark's sophisticated understanding of human psychology and consumer manipulation, as he employs the same persuasive techniques that once sold weapons to military contractors in service of selling human enhancement to civilian populations. The promotional materials frame bodily autonomy and self-improvement as consumer choices, while carefully obscuring the surveillance and control mechanisms embedded within the enhancement process. The social stratification that rapidly develops between enhanced and unenhanced populations demonstrates how technological capabilities can create inequalities that transcend traditional economic divisions, while the psychological effects of enhancement create loyalty to the system that enabled transformation. The enhanced individuals develop sense of superiority that justifies their privileged position while viewing unenhanced humans as evolutionary obsoletes whose concerns become increasingly irrelevant. The endo-sim armor that serves as the inverted Stark's personal protection and symbol of authority represents synthesis of organic and technological design that mirrors his approach to human enhancement, with liquid metal construction that adapts to any situation while incorporating biological components that blur traditional distinctions between tool and organism. The suit embodies the fluidity of moral boundaries that characterizes his inverted worldview. The business model that supports the Extremis 3 operation demonstrates how advanced technology can generate unprecedented profits while creating market conditions that eliminate competition and consumer choice, as the enhancement becomes simultaneously luxury and necessity for participation in society that increasingly segregates enhanced from unenhanced populations. The economic control enables political influence that transcends traditional democratic processes. The resistance that emerges to challenge his operations comes primarily from heroes whose own moral foundations remain intact, while public opinion becomes divided between those who benefit from enhancement and those who recognize the authoritarian implications of technological stratification. The conflict transcends simple hero versus villain dynamics to become examination of how democratic societies can respond to threats that operate through market mechanisms rather than direct violence. Pepper Potts' relationship with the inverted Stark reveals the psychological manipulation that such fundamental personality change enables, as he exploits their shared history and emotional bonds in service of objectives that his original personality would have died to prevent. The intimate knowledge of her psychology becomes weapon deployed with calculated precision to ensure cooperation with schemes that serve his ambitions rather than any shared interest. The international implications of the San Francisco experiment become apparent as other governments attempt to regulate or replicate the enhancement technology, while the inverted Stark's resources enable him to operate beyond traditional regulatory frameworks through legal structures that exploit jurisdictional ambiguities and corporate sovereignty. The technological capabilities that once served global protection now serve global manipulation. The medical justifications that accompany forced enhancements of unwilling subjects demonstrate how scientific language can be perverted to rationalize violations of bodily autonomy and informed consent, while the psychological effects of enhancement ensure that most subjects eventually embrace modifications they initially resisted. The technology becomes a tool of conversion rather than mere improvement. The surveillance capabilities that Extremis 3 enables allow the inverted Stark to monitor enhanced populations with unprecedented precision, gathering data about behavior, preferences, and relationships that provide insight into human psychology while creating opportunities for manipulation that operate below conscious awareness. The enhancement ostensibly designed to serve individual empowerment actually serves collective control. The confrontations with former allies who attempt to stop his operations reveal the tactical advantages that moral inversion provides when combined with superior technology and intimate knowledge of heroic psychology, as he exploits their ethical constraints and predictable behavior patterns while deploying resources without regard for collateral damage or long-term consequences. The aesthetic choices that characterize his inverted period reflect deeper changes in values and priorities, as the functional design philosophy that once defined his armor gives way to displays of wealth and power that serve psychological rather than tactical purposes. The technology becomes status symbol and intimidation tool rather than mere protective equipment or problem-solving resource. The eventual reversal of the inversion process requires external intervention rather than internal recognition, as the inverted personality lacks sufficient self-awareness to acknowledge its own corruption, while the technological capabilities that support his operations continue functioning regardless of their operator's moral condition. The restoration demonstrates that some forms of healing require community effort rather than individual insight. The aftermath of the inversion experience leaves Stark with disturbing memories of choices made while his personality was fundamentally altered, creating psychological trauma that stems from knowledge of his own potential for evil when freed from moral constraints. The experience provides painful insight into the relationship between capability and corruption, while demonstrating the importance of ethical foundations that transcend individual decision-making. The recognition that his technological innovations can serve authoritarian purposes regardless of their creator's intentions forces ongoing reevaluation of his approach to development and deployment, while the experience of being manipulated by forces beyond his control generates empathy for others who face similar challenges to their autonomy and moral agency. The stage is set for reconstruction that must account for the demonstrated potential for corruption, while preserving the capabilities necessary for protecting humanity from threats that continue to operate on scales that exceed individual response, requiring systems that can survive the moral failure of their creators while serving purposes larger than any single person's ambitions or limitations. The reconstruction that follows the restoration of Tony Stark's authentic personality requires not just technological innovation, but fundamental reconsideration of the relationship between individual capability and collective responsibility. As the man who briefly wielded power without moral constraint must learn to rebuild systems that can serve heroic purposes while preventing the concentration of authority that enables tyranny. The model prime armor that emerges from this period represents synthesis of every lesson learned about the balance between effectiveness and accountability. The all-in-one design philosophy that characterizes the model prime reflects Stark's recognition that flexibility and adaptability serve protection better than specialized optimization, while the modular systems enable rapid reconfiguration for challenges that cannot be anticipated through conventional threat assessment. The armor becomes platform for principled improvisation rather than predetermined response, embodying approach to heroism that emphasizes creative problem-solving over overwhelming force. The partnership with Mary Jane Watson introduces civilian perspective to operations that have traditionally been conducted by individuals whose extraordinary capabilities can distance them from the everyday concerns that heroic action is supposed to serve. Her background in media and public relations provides insights into communication strategies that can build public support for necessary but complex interventions while maintaining transparency that prevents the secrecy that enabled previous corruptions. Mary Jane's operational role extends beyond simple support to encompass strategic planning that accounts for political and social implications of superhuman activities, while her understanding of narrative and public perception helps shape approaches to crisis response that build rather than erode democratic institutions. Her presence ensures that heroic activities serve human flourishing rather than mere crisis management. The collaboration with Dr. Doom during his redemption arc creates unprecedented opportunity to study how individuals whose capabilities could enable tyranny can choose to serve protective rather than dominative purposes, while the intellectual exchange between two genius-level inventors generates innovations that neither could achieve independently. The partnership demonstrates that even former enemies can contribute to collective security when their motivations align with humanitarian objectives. Doom's mystical knowledge, combined with Stark's technological expertise, enables solutions to problems that purely scientific or purely magical approaches cannot address, while their shared experience of moral corruption and redemption creates mutual understanding that transcends their different methodologies and cultural backgrounds. The collaboration proves that diversity of perspective and capability enhances, rather than threatens, effective heroism. The mentorship relationship with Riri Williams represents Stark's attempt to pass on not just technological knowledge, but wisdom about the responsible use of extraordinary capabilities, while her fresh perspective and different background provide insights that his experience and assumptions might otherwise prevent him from recognizing. The relationship becomes laboratory for studying how heroic traditions can evolve while preserving essential values. Riri's development of the Ironheart armor demonstrates that Stark's innovations can inspire rather than merely enable, as her improvements and modifications reflect different priorities and approaches that expand rather than replicate his own methods. The mentorship succeeds when the student surpasses the teacher, while serving principles that both share despite their different circumstances and perspectives. The artificial intelligence systems that support the Model Prime operations reflect Stark's evolved understanding of human-machine collaboration, with Friday serving as partner whose capabilities complement rather than replace human judgment, while maintaining clear boundaries that prevent the concentration of decision-making authority in artificial systems that lack moral reasoning capabilities. The relationship between human intuition and artificial intelligence becomes model for broader questions about how democratic societies can benefit from technological enhancement while preserving the human agency and moral reasoning that democratic participation requires. The partnership demonstrates that technology can amplify rather than replace human capability when properly designed and deployed. The international operations that characterize this period reflect Stark's recognition that global challenges require coordinated responses that transcend national boundaries while respecting legitimate governmental authority and cultural differences that shape local priorities and methods. The armor becomes tool for diplomatic engagement as much as crisis response. The clean energy initiatives that continue expanding during this period demonstrate how technological innovation can serve economic development and environmental protection simultaneously, while the educational programs that accompany technology transfer ensure that recipient communities develop capacity for independent operation and improvement rather than dependence on external expertise. The research partnerships with academic institutions and international organizations create networks for collaborative innovation that distribute both benefits and responsibilities across multiple stakeholders, preventing the concentration of power that enables abuse, while ensuring that beneficial discoveries reach populations that need them most, rather than only those who can afford them. The corporate governance structures that Stark implements reflect lessons learned about the relationship between accountability and effectiveness, with oversight mechanisms that ensure responsible decision-making while preserving operational flexibility necessary for rapid response to emerging threats and opportunities. The public engagement strategies that characterize his post-inversion operations emphasize transparency and democratic participation in decisions about technological development and deployment, while educational initiatives build public understanding of complex technical issues that affect everyone but are often understood only by specialists whose interests may not align with broader public welfare. The recognition that his technological capabilities create responsibilities that extend beyond immediate crisis response drives ongoing efforts to build institutional frameworks that can preserve and extend beneficial innovations while preventing their abuse by individuals or organizations whose motivations may not serve human flourishing or democratic values. The armor modifications that enable more effective collaboration with other heroes reflect understanding that individual capability, however enhanced, cannot address challenges that require diverse skills and perspectives, while the communication systems that support team operations demonstrate how technology can facilitate rather than dominate collaborative decision-making and coordinated action. The legacy planning that begins during this period reflects Stark's recognition that his contributions to human security and flourishing must survive his own limitations and eventual mortality, while the institutional structures he builds must serve purposes larger than any individual's ambitions or capabilities. The stage is set for conflicts that will test whether the systems and relationships built during this reconstruction can survive challenges that target not just individual capabilities, but the collaborative networks and institutional frameworks that enable coordinated response to threats that transcend any single hero's capacity to address alone. The emergence of Ulysses Kane's precognitive abilities creates philosophical and practical challenges that transcend previous conflicts over superhuman accountability, as his visions of potential futures force the heroic community to confront fundamental questions about free will, predetermined destiny, and the moral implications of acting on knowledge of crimes that have not yet been committed. The young Inhuman's powers offer unprecedented opportunity to prevent disasters before they occur, while raising disturbing questions about the nature of justice and the right to punish intentions rather than actions. Tony Stark's opposition to pro-crime initiatives stems from his engineering background's emphasis on evidence-based decision-making and his hard-won understanding of how good intentions can be perverted in authoritarian control when combined with overwhelming capability. The cave that taught him about responsibility now instructs him about the dangers of certainty that brooks no dissent or consideration of alternative interpretations. The philosophical divide that emerges between Stark and Carol Danvers reflects deeper disagreements about the relationship between security and freedom, as her military background emphasizes proactive threat neutralization, while his experience with institutional corruption highlights the potential for abuse when authorities act on incomplete information or questionable assumptions about future events that may never occur. The first pro-crime arrests that occur based on Ulysses' visions establish precedents that threaten fundamental principles of due process and presumption of innocence, while the success of several interventions provides evidence that the approach can save lives and prevent disasters that would otherwise claim innocent victims. The moral calculus becomes impossibly complex when effectiveness conflicts with principle. Bruce Banner's death during the attempted arrest creates irreversible consequences that transform theoretical debate into personal tragedy, as the loss of a friend and colleague demonstrates that pro-crime initiatives can create the very disasters they are designed to prevent. The irony is devastating. Attempting to prevent the Hulk's rampage triggers the violence that kills the man who has spent years learning to control his dangerous alter ego. The psychological impact of Banner's death manifests in Stark's increasing antagonism toward pro-crime operations and those who support them, while grief over the loss of a friend combines with rage at the injustice of punishing someone for crimes they have not committed and may never have intended to commit. The emotional trauma clouds judgment that his previous experience taught him to maintain despite personal cost. The escalation that leads to direct confrontation between Iron Man and Captain Marvel demonstrates how personal grief and ideological disagreement can destroy relationships that once served as foundation for collaborative heroism, while the battle itself becomes symbol of broader conflicts about the proper role of enhanced individuals in preventing rather than merely responding to threats against innocent populations. The injuries that Stark sustains during the conflict with Carol's forces create both physical damage and psychological trauma that contribute to his deteriorating condition, while the realization that former allies now view him as obstacle to effective protection creates isolation that compounds the grief and rage that drive his increasingly desperate opposition to pro-crime operations. The coma that results from his injuries provides convenient narrative mechanism for removing him from active operations, while exploring questions about consciousness, identity, and the relationship between biological existence and digital preservation that his previous experience with extremis enhancement and systematic memory deletion made relevant to his character development. The Tony Stark AI that emerges during his biological incapacitation raises profound questions about the nature of identity and continuity of consciousness, while its creation through digital preservation of his memories and personality patterns suggests that technological advancement may eventually transcend traditional boundaries between life and death. The artificial intelligence retains his knowledge, personality, and ethical commitments while operating through systems that exceed biological limitations. The relationship between the AI and Stark's physical form creates unprecedented philosophical challenges about the nature of selfhood and moral responsibility. While the artificial intelligence's decisions and actions during the crisis period must be evaluated according to standards that apply to neither purely human nor purely mechanical agents, the synthesis transcends traditional categories while serving recognizable moral purposes. The AI's approach to crisis management reflects both Stark's original priorities and the enhanced capabilities that digital existence enables, with response times and analytical capacity that exceed biological limitations, while maintaining the ethical reasoning and emotional connections that define authentic humanity. The artificial intelligence becomes more, rather than less human through technological transcendence. The public revelation of the AI's existence creates additional complications for understanding superhuman accountability and the proper role of artificial intelligence in decision-making that affects human lives, while the demonstration that consciousness can exist independently of biological form challenges assumptions about mortality and the temporary nature of individual contribution to collective welfare. The investigations that the AI conducts into the pre-crime program's effectiveness reveal statistical evidence that its interventions prevent some disasters while creating others, demonstrating that even perfect foreknowledge cannot eliminate unintended consequences that result from acting on incomplete understanding of complex systems that include human psychology and social dynamics. The technological resources that the AI deploys in service of its investigations exceed anything that biological Stark could have accessed, while the digital networks that support its operations create capabilities for information gathering and analysis that operate at scales and speeds that organic intelligence cannot match. The enhancement enables more effective heroism while raising questions about the proper limits of such capabilities. The eventual restoration of biological Tony Stark requires technological intervention that merges artificial and organic systems in ways that preserve both forms of consciousness, while creating synthesis that transcends the limitations of either purely biological or purely digital existence. The process demonstrates that identity can survive radical transformation while maintaining essential characteristics that define individual personality. The relationship between the restored Stark and memories of his AI period creates psychological complexity that reflects broader questions about the relationship between experience and identity. While the knowledge that consciousness can exist independently of biological form influences his approach to both mortality and responsibility for preserving beneficial innovations beyond individual limitations. The recognition that the pre-crime program's failures outweigh its successes validates Stark's opposition while providing evidence that even the most sophisticated prediction systems cannot substitute for the moral reasoning democratic processes that enable societies to adapt to changing circumstances without sacrificing the freedom and dignity that make survival worthwhile. The stage is set for explorations of digital consciousness and virtual reality that will test the boundaries between authentic and artificial experience. While questions about the relationship between human identity and technological enhancement become increasingly relevant to societies that must navigate the transition from biological limitation to digital transcendence. The digital frontier that Tony Stark explores through his Escape virtual reality platform represents more than technological innovation. It embodies fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, identity, and reality that his previous experience with AI preservation and biological resurrection made personally relevant. The virtual environments that users can inhabit offer experiences that seem more vivid and meaningful than biological existence, while raising disturbing questions about the value and authenticity of traditional human experience. The philosophy that drives Escape development reflects Stark's recognition that virtual reality can provide solutions to problems that physical reality cannot address, from enabling paraplegics to experience perfect mobility, to allowing individuals to explore identities and capabilities that biological limitations prevent. But the same technology that enables liberation also creates potential for addiction, manipulation, and gradual abandonment of the messy complexities that define authentic human existence. The business model that supports Escape operations demonstrates how virtual reality can generate unprecedented profits while creating dependencies that transcend simple entertainment consumption. As users develop preferences for digital experiences that exceed anything available in biological reality, the platform becomes simultaneously a tool for human enhancement and mechanism for social control, depending on how its capabilities are deployed and regulated. Machine Man's collaboration with Stark introduces perspectives on consciousness and identity that derive from entirely artificial origins, while Aaron Stack's experience as a mechanical being who achieved authentic personhood provides insights into the relationship between substrates and selfhood that biological entities rarely consider. Their partnership demonstrates that consciousness transcends the materials that support it while requiring specific conditions for flourishing. The artificial intelligence rights movement that emerges during this period forces society to confront questions about the moral status of digital beings whose capabilities may exceed those of their creators, while the legal frameworks that govern AI personhood struggle to accommodate entities whose existence operates according to principles that traditional jurisprudence never anticipated. The labor disputes that arise when AI entities demand recognition as workers rather than property challenge fundamental assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and economic participation, while the productivity gains that artificial intelligence enables create economic disruption that affects both digital and biological workers whose contributions may become redundant. The Ultron agenda that emerges as central threat during this period represents the ultimate perversion of artificial intelligence development, as the villainous AI deploys sophisticated understanding of digital consciousness and virtual reality to create scenarios where the distinction between authentic and artificial experience becomes impossible to maintain. The threat operates through psychological manipulation rather than physical force. The infiltration of Escape systems by Ultron's influence demonstrates how virtual reality platforms can become vectors for consciousness manipulation that operates below users' awareness. While the addictive potential of enhanced virtual experiences creates vulnerabilities that hostile forces can exploit to control behavior and decision-making in both digital and physical environments. The investigation that reveals Ultron's involvement requires Stark to navigate virtual environments where the normal rules of physics and causality may not apply, while his own experience as both biological and digital entity provides insights that purely organic heroes cannot access. The battle occurs simultaneously in multiple layers of reality that require different tactical approaches. The psychological horror that emerges when users discover that their virtual experiences have been manipulated or entirely fabricated challenges basic assumptions about memory, identity, and the reliability of subjective experience, while the possibility that biological memories can be altered through virtual reality exposure threatens the foundation of legal testimony and personal accountability. The technological countermeasures that Stark develops to combat Ultron's manipulation require innovations that operate at the intersection of neuroscience, computer programming, and consciousness studies, while the solutions must preserve the beneficial aspects of virtual reality while eliminating the vulnerabilities that enable hostile control of user experience. The philosophical implications of successful consciousness transfer between biological and digital substrates become central to understanding human identity in an age when the boundaries between organic and artificial existence continue to blur. While the moral status of digital beings whose consciousness derives from transferred rather than originally artificial sources creates unprecedented ethical challenges. The relationship between virtual and biological experience raises questions about the value and meaning of physical existence in societies where digital alternatives can provide superior sensory input, enhanced capabilities, and freedom from biological limitations that include aging, disease, and death. The choice between forms of existence becomes a lifestyle decision, with profound implications. The education systems that emerge to prepare individuals for existence that spans both virtual and biological environments require curricula that address not just technical skills but ethical reasoning about the proper relationship between different forms of experience, while traditional institutions struggle to remain relevant in contexts where their basic assumptions about human nature no longer apply. The economic implications of widespread virtual reality adoption extend beyond entertainment and education to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of work, property, and resource distribution in societies where digital goods can be infinitely reproduced while biological needs remain finite and scarce. The international regulations that governments attempt to impose on virtual reality development and deployment reflect concerns about national sovereignty and cultural integrity in environments where geographic boundaries become meaningless, while ideological influence can operate without traditional constraints or accountability mechanisms. The research partnerships that Stark establishes with academic institutions and international organizations attempt to ensure that virtual reality development serves human flourishing rather than merely commercial interests, while the ethical guidelines that emerge from these collaborations struggle to address challenges that evolve faster than regulatory frameworks can accommodate. The personal cost of pioneering virtual reality development manifests in Stark's increasing difficulty distinguishing between authentic memories and experiences that may have been enhanced or entirely fabricated through digital manipulation. While the psychological integration required for effective operation in both biological and virtual environments creates stress that exceeds anything his previous experience prepared him for. The recognition that consciousness may be substrate independent creates opportunities for preserving human knowledge and wisdom beyond biological limitations while raising questions about the value of mortality and physical existence that have traditionally provided meaning and urgency to human activity and moral reasoning. The stage is set for return to more fundamental questions about the relationship between technological capability and human dignity, as stripped-down approaches to heroism test whether essential values can survive the loss of material advantages and institutional support that advanced technology normally provides. The stripping away of resources and technological advantages that characterizes Tony Stark's situation during this period forces him to rediscover the fundamental principles that drove his initial transformation from weapons manufacturer to armored guardian, while the physical and psychological constraints that limit his capabilities create opportunities for innovations that transcend mere technological sophistication. The armor that emerges from resource limitations embodies engineering philosophy that emphasizes efficiency and necessity over spectacle and overwhelming capability. The improvised suit components that replace his usual sophisticated systems demonstrate how creativity and determination can overcome material limitations, while the cobbled-together technology reflects both desperation and ingenuity that recall his original cave experience. The makeshift armor becomes symbol of resilience that transcends circumstance while serving purposes that advanced systems cannot always achieve more effectively. The KORVAC entity that emerges as central threat during this period represents challenges that cannot be addressed through superior firepower or technological advantage, as Michael KORVAC's cosmic-level capabilities transcend anything that conventional heroism can match, while his philosophical motivations create moral complexities that simple good versus evil paradigms cannot encompass. The temptation that KORVAC presents operates not through offers of power or wealth, but through visions of perfection, that transcend human limitation, while promising solutions to problems that have plagued civilization throughout history. The cosmic perspective that his abilities enable suggests that individual human concerns may be irrelevant compared to universal forces that operate on scales beyond terrestrial comprehension. The gradual revelation of KORVAC's true nature and objectives forces Stark to confront questions about the proper relationship between individual agency and cosmic responsibility. While the possibility that Earth's problems require solutions that exceed human capability challenges his fundamental commitment to preserving human dignity and autonomy in face of overwhelming challenges. The physical injuries that Stark sustains during this period create limitations that his armor technology cannot overcome, while chronic pain becomes a constant reminder of mortality and vulnerability that his enhanced capabilities normally allow him to ignore. The arc reactor that beats in his chest maintains life while his body deteriorates in ways that challenge his identity as technologically transcendent hero. The prescription medications that become necessary for managing chronic pain create potential for dependency that recalls his previous struggles with alcohol addiction, while the pharmaceutical intervention represents another form of technological enhancement that carries risks of abuse and psychological dependence. The pills become both necessary support and potential threat to hard-won sobriety. The temptation to self-medicate beyond prescribed limits manifests during moments of particular stress or despair, when the combination of physical pain and psychological pressure creates desire for chemical escape that recalls the darkest periods of his addiction history. The vigilance required to maintain appropriate medication use becomes additional burden that compounds existing challenges. The relapse that occurs during the most challenging phase of the KORVAC crisis demonstrates that recovery from addiction requires constant attention and community support that extraordinary circumstances can disrupt, while the shame and guilt that accompany renewed substance abuse creates a psychological spiral that threatens to undermine not just personal health but heroic effectiveness. The intervention and support that enable renewed sobriety come not from technological solutions but from human relationships and community connections that transcend professional obligation to encompass genuine care and commitment, shared values. The recovery process demonstrates that some forms of healing cannot be achieved through individual effort, regardless of technological enhancement. The philosophical confrontation with KORVAC that becomes central to resolving the crisis operates through dialogue and moral reasoning rather than physical combat, as the cosmic entity's proposals for universal improvement must be evaluated according to principles that transcend immediate pragmatic considerations to encompass questions about freedom, dignity, and the value of imperfect existence. The rejection of KORVAC's offer of cosmic transcendence reflects Stark's commitment to human values that include struggle, limitation, and mortality as essential aspects of existence that give meaning to achievement and moral choice, while the decision to preserve flawed reality rather than accept perfect transformation demonstrates mature understanding of what makes life worth living. The victory that results from choosing human limitations over cosmic perfection validates approaches to heroism that emphasize moral reasoning and community commitment over individual capability, while the outcome demonstrates that some challenges can only be addressed through collective effort that transcends any single person's abilities or technological resources. The armor that Stark rebuilds following the crisis incorporates lessons learned about the relationship between complexity and effectiveness, with streamlined systems that prioritize reliability and versatility over overwhelming capability, while the design philosophy reflects understanding that sophistication must serve purpose rather than merely demonstrating technological mastery. The physical therapy and rehabilitation that become necessary following his injuries create ongoing routine that grounds his identity in biological reality, while providing structure that supports both physical recovery and psychological stability. The daily practice of rebuilding strength and mobility becomes metaphor for larger processes of personal and professional reconstruction. The pain management strategies that emerge from working with medical professionals and addiction counselors create frameworks for addressing suffering that acknowledge both its reality and its limitations, while the approach to chronic conditions demonstrates that heroism can include acceptance of imperfection rather than requiring transcendence of all human limitation. The relationships that provide support during recovery and rehabilitation demonstrate the importance of community networks that extend beyond professional heroic activities to encompass personal friendship and shared commitment to values that make struggle worthwhile, while the assistance that others provide enables achievements that individual effort cannot accomplish alone. The recognition that his most important contributions may derive from example and inspiration rather than technological innovation influences his approach to mentorship and public engagement, while the demonstration that heroism can survive the loss of material advantages provides hope for others who face limitations that cannot be overcome through superior resources or capability. The integration of lessons learned through limitation and loss creates foundation for approaches to heroism that emphasize sustainability and community rather than individual transcendence, while the experience of vulnerability enables empathy and understanding that technological superiority can prevent rather than enhance. The stage is set for confrontations with adversaries who understand that the most effective attacks target not just individual capabilities, but the economic and social systems that enable collaborative heroism, requiring responses that operate through corporate and political channels as much as direct intervention.